Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Hello, my friends. So it's the moment I've been waiting for. Hopefully you have as well. We are in the middle of cross examination of Trooper Paul, and they talked about a couple different things already earlier this morning, different lines of questioning. But what I really wanted to jump in for was when they start going through his chart. And we've discussed, at least on the last recap, we discussed a number of different issues that I see with that y'all see, questions that we have, things of that nature. And I think where I've got it paused here is that they're going to start getting into that. So let's take a look here and see what we got. And let me pull up my banner for him.
You stated in your report that you Google mapped Miss Reed's path of travel. Well, let me ask you a different question. If I could withdraw that question with permission. Yes. Your diagram has all those arrows pointing at specific locations. Very, very specific, very thin arrows point, correct?
Yes.
If you start off with an incorrect assumption about where John O'Keefe's body was, right? Hypothetically, if you were to start off with an incorrect assumption where John O'Keefe's body was,
let me
every single
find what witness.
Every single item that you note on that diagram would then be off as well.
Objection.
Is that true?
I mean, I guess hypothetically, depends on how off you want to be.
The answer is yes, correct?
Hypothetically.
You stated in your report that you Google mapped Miss Reed's path of travel.
All right. This, y'all,
based on what you determined.
This was one of the biggest complaints that I had talked about so far was the Google mapping of her location and where she went, and using that as the basis for the odometer readings, which he then used as the basis for his chart. Let me see what y'all are saying in the chat. Hi, Candace. Hi, Fender. Happy to see you guys. So happy y'all are here. I'm happy you were able to join, Candace, because I know you're training for your half marathon. Shout out to y'all. Happy to see you guys. So we're going to get into now the problems that I foresaw. I remember I was like on the recap, I was even like, look, there's so many ways to go about this cross-examination. Like, I don't even know where to start. Like, as I was listening to direct, I was like, oh my God. I could do this cross-examination on him, I feel like, just because I saw so many errors and so many issues. So this will be interesting because this is one of the things that I think is one of the biggest problems as per his opinion and the whole thing with the chart. I know that there were even some of y'all in the chat that were like, yeah, I don't know, the chart, man, like the chart kind of, you know, is a bit damning. Like maybe she did hit him, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know, no. This chart is the biggest disaster of all time. Never mind his testimony and his expertise or lack thereof or any of that. The chart is a disaster. And there's a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest ones has to do with how he, essentially the foundation for how he created the chart. And a lot, there's more problems. I'm sure we'll get into all of it.
It's likely the two, and you said that it's quote, it's likely that the two events, meaning the triggering events, occurred at the same time the Lexus was at 34 Fairview at the time of the play.
And here's what I posited. I had this theory on the last recap. This was when we were going back and watching with Yuri Buchanan and watching the footage of her backing out of John's driveway and stuff several times. And then the time when she hits him with the car, hits his car with her car, right? And bumps into it. And I thought to myself, what if that is the trigger event? Here, I'm going to go ahead, before we hear from Jackson, I'm going to tell you what I thought, because it'll be interesting to see if there was anything to it. My thought was, wait a second, she's doing a 3-point turn. Didn't Trooper Paul testify that there was a 3-point turn at a right surrounding this triggering event, right? Which he's saying is when John O'Keefe was hit at 34 Fairview. And as we were watching it, and I was like, wait a second, hold on. What if that was the triggering event? What if that was the bump that we just saw? And when she's backing out of his driveway, and then, and it makes sense, right? And the only difference as to why he put it at 34 Fairview is because based off of this whole thing with the odometer, which he based off of Google Map, average length of time it would take to drive here and there and figure it out from there. So if he had that wrong, there's no way to say that this wasn't the actual thing. So let's just see what happens.
Yes.
The first triggering event is what? Was it a 3-point turn or I thought I heard you say both.
I guess it would be more. I mean, 3-point turns essentially. I guess it's a 3-point turn.
Okay.
Yes.
And I even said, I was like, wait, 3-point turn, U-turn, aren't they kind of the same thing? I remember saying
It
that.
could have been a U-turn. I mean, it's still turning around, so you had to make a U-turn when that's a 3-point turn or not. But it's still
No. Remember when she bumped into his car, John O'Keefe's car, and it moved the tire, and they brought that up with Yuri. You know, they played the video on direct, but then on cross they zoomed in, and it shows her leaving his house, and early in the morning, I think it is, and she is backing up to leave, and she backs into and collides with his car. Right. So that she does every time she leaves that driveway, she has to do a 3-point turn because she pulls in forward and then she has to do a 3-point turn to leave. That's what first made me think, because this dude had said that the triggering event, there was a 3-point turn. And then after that, she was reversing, going forward. That's a 3-point turn. And then like accelerating to drive away. Right. Or whatever. And that's when I was like, wait, hang on. What if that bump with his car was actually the triggering event? And it wasn't anything to do with hitting him, because he was already at this point already almost dead. Right. He was already in the lawn. I know. I don't blame you, Fender.
Not to be picky, but it's sort of my job.
Okay.
A U-turn, traveling in one direction. Turn, right? Turning the wheel, never changing gear.
That's true. The difference is in a U-turn, you don't change gear. Right. You wouldn't reverse.
3-point turn requires
That's the
moving
thank
forward,
you, Jackson.
stopping,
I was like saying, how are they
changing gears,
right?
backward, stopping,
Correct.
changing gears.
So it's a 3-point turn. It's a 3-point turn.
correct.
Well, those are two very different maneuvers, right? You'd agree.
It's in a sense. I was trying to say she made a U-turn. Like you can
Fucking
say
hell.
they made a U-turn. It's a 3-point turn.
No.
They're still making a U-turn, and I didn't mean it as like
No.
she literally had to make a direct
He's
U-turn.
right.
She was turning around, and obviously the diagram, but the trigger shows
Eat
a
'em
3-point
alive.
turn.
Eat him alive.
Well,
In the chart, she backs up and goes forward and backs up.
Direction, right?
Like that's
That could be a better way.
that's the whole thing. The whole point is that what he was trying to say is she goes forward, she backs up, she goes forward, as if she's trying to like run over him several times, right? But what if that was if everything is based on this chart and the chart is based on absolute nonsense? Oh my god. Oh my god. Like what? I could actually have been right about that. That's insane, right? But that's the triggering event, is her bumping into his car. Holy shit.
Yes.
You didn't say that. You said U-turn. So are you changing your testimony from Friday that it was a 3-point turn, or could it possibly have been a U-turn?
It's a 3-point turn.
Okay, because you have evidence of the starting, stopping, changing gears, reversing,
Right,
stopping,
right.
changing gears.
See, this actually works
That's correct.
great for what
You
I
said
was
U-turn,
saying.
That was inaccurate.
Objection.
The objection sustained.
Let's get back to the path of travel when you began your analysis.
Okay.
How did you
Excellent.
know what the Lexus's path of travel was
Right.
that day?
Google Maps.
I got the directions from Trooper Proctor.
Mm. Oh, okay.
And what did Trooper Proctor tell you in terms of the
You said
path
Google
of
Maps
travel?
on direct.
Starting point and an ending point, tell you the exact path Lexus traveled.
No, they just all I got was mostly just the addresses.
And then you
You
Google
got
Maps.
a-
Right.
2 points on a map. And Trooper Proctor told you Lexus traveled.
Offender, are you asking if a U-turn and 3-point turn are the same thing? That's what I was saying. The big difference, and what Jackson was pointing out. The big difference is in a U-turn, you don't actually put the car in reverse. You just go forward and you make a U-turn, versus in a 3-point turn, you pull forward, you stop, so there's braking. You put the car in reverse. You go backwards. You stop. Then you put the brakes on, and then you put the car back into drive again. And then depending on how many, sometimes you have to do more than a 3-point turn. Like that could happen. So the difference is the braking and changing gears. That's a big, big, big difference between the two. Because with a U-turn, you just are still in drive. Your directional turnaround, but your car is just in drive. And once you start the U-turn, there's no stopping or reversing.
Point B, there are multiple ways to get from point A to point B. You agree with that, right?
Yes.
You picked one of those, right? The path of travel includes freeways, et cetera, right?
Yes.
But as you sit here, you don't know what her actual path of travel was. This could have been something different, right?
It could have been something. That's why I gave a range on my diagram.
Oh my God. Well, then the range, that doesn't help.
Scientific
Oh,
evidence
fucking
to
hell.
establish what her
That doesn't help. The range. So remember, that diagram doesn't have times. The way he was able to insert the times was based on the odometer. The way he figured out where the odometer would have been hypothetically is based on her path of travel. And the way he got the path of travel was by averaging all the different possibilities of how she could have driven to all these different places based on Google Maps. It's absolutely insane.
her actual path of travel is, or did you just guess?
Right. Correct, Fender. Yes.
I got the addresses from Trooper Proctor. I put them into the thing, and and one of the possibilities of 36 miles. And that was
This stuff.
after looking at all of them. At 36 miles is a possibility.
Right. Understood. So that's what I'm trying
It
to
was
get to.
36 miles.
Okay.
That's one possibility. It was 36 miles.
Mhm.
Yep.
One route of travel, right?
Correct.
There were other possibilities, right?
Yes.
So between and among the possibility that you picked and the other possibilities, you just sort of have to guess. And there's no science to it. You said, I'm going to pick that and put it in my report, right?
I know.
No.
he is-
That's not how that works.
And he's
Okay,
also
well,
still law enforcement. He still works for the
Her
National-
odometer mileage on the car from the download and
It-
time we had the vehicle shows
it
36
is.
miles. So when I plugged those addresses into Google, it came up as 36 miles as a possibility.
See, as a possibility. This
You knew
is
that there was another route of
Wow.
travel to the same location, correct?
What do you mean?
There were alternative routes of travel to
Mhm.
the same two.
there were.
From and to the same points, correct?
Yes. Yes.
You could have tried to extract the location data from
Right.
the cell phone to determine the exact route of travel, correct?
Oh,
I don't know. I don't have access to do cell phone extractions.
So that answers my next question. You did not even attempt to do that, did you?
No.
You did attempt to analyze the key cycles for the Lexus in order to determine placement of that vehicle. You just talked about that.
Thunder, who do you
right?
mean?
Yes.
Who's she? Judge
Really
Beth?
clear for the jurors because most people have probably never heard of key cycles. A key
Right.
cycle does not have any location data associated with it whatsoever, does it?
Correct.
It just shows you when a vehicle is turned on, the ignition is on and off. That's one cycle, correct?
No.
Tell me what I've got wrong.
Key cycle, the car doesn't have to be turned on.
Say that again.
It could go from off to run. The engine doesn't have to be started to off.
Understood. So if it turns on, well, every single ignition is a key cycle. Every time the engine turns on, that's absolutely a key cycle. Once it's turned off again, right?
That gets recorded as an ignition cycle.
So a key cycle can be an ignition cycle, but it doesn't have to be an ignition cycle. It also can be just turning the sort of accessory on, right?
The key cycles to turn the accessories on.
All right. But it doesn't, my question was, and where we started with this conversation is, it does not have any location data on it whatsoever.
Correct.
All right. So when you drive your car, you walk out, get in the car, turn the ignition on.
Oh, I did not hear that.
Turn it off.
Or
That's one
see
key
that.
cycle.
Did
Or
you?
in one ignition cycle.
But and I'm going to use the word key cycles because you use the word key cycles in your report. That's what we're talking about.
I'm using that because that's how the trigger was read.
That's how what?
The triggers were read on the text stream. That's how they read them. Key cycles.
By key cycles.
Yes.
I'm going to use that phrase key cycle.
Okay.
We're talking about the same thing. It's an ignition on, ignition off cycle.
Doesn't have to be on.
So you mean the engine doesn't have to be turned on?
Correct.
Right. But if you're seeing triggering events, not trying to be tricky here, seeing triggering events, your car's in motion, what does that tell you? The ignition's on or off?
The ignition is on.
Right. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
what it is.
Good point.
But it has no location data associated with whatsoever. It could be here, it could be in Wyoming.
Right.
The car wouldn't know the difference. It's not going to report the difference to you, correct?
On the key cycle,
Correct.
on just the key cycle. The key
And
cycle. doesn't have to
remember, guys, like in Murdaugh, for example, right? This is a great example because this is how when they got the info from the car, right, with like the telemetry and stuff, where it gave like what gear the car was in or like the speed of the amount of miles per hour and all that shit, like with the car. The way that they were able to determine where that was happening was by combining that with the cell phone location data. So that they knew here he is when he's driving this fast, here he is when he's putting his car in park, here he is when the car is off, and all that. So we've seen that with Murdaugh. Yeah, the key cycle, they're kind of trying to explain that now, but I don't even think this expert can even explain it because he had only just discovered this data fairly recently, and he had never used it before. This is the first time he's ever seen this Toyota tech stream data, which is what he's using for this chart. He'd never used it before, never heard of it before, and discovered it, I forget the date, but it was well into the investigation fairly recently. And then now he's interpreting it. And one of the comments I made on the last recap is, obviously they should, this is a rhetorical question. Shouldn't the Commonwealth have brought in somebody from Toyota to interpret this data, right? But instead, no, they bring in, guess what? Somebody from the Massachusetts State Police, as per usual.
Locations.
Insane.
Say that again.
The key cycle does not give a location.
Right. So your analysis
So you
is trying to go from a
Oh my
known
God.
key cycle that you can figure out and then work backward from there to try to figure out where the car was on a particular ignition cycle or key cycle, correct?
I didn't use the key cycle to put it back.
Say that again.
I did not use the key cycle to place the car back in its location. The key cycles were All I got from the key cycles is that they occurred close within proximity to the time we've had the vehicle, not basically saying that this was the location based off the key cycle.
Well, let's look at Exhibit 591 with the court's permission.
Okay.
Did you testify on Friday that this is a copy of the exhibit that was put in 591, this is part of your report, correct?
Yes, it is.
And this is the chart that shows when this arrow, that arrow indicates top and bottom where your testing occurred, correct?
Yes.
And we move over to the left, that is key cycle what?
1164.
Right. So you've testified, and
Let me pull this down.
Your Honor, I don't mind if that stays up. You can turn the lights on. I don't think it hurts anything. You stated in your report that there were, quote, 2 triggers recorded on odometer 12629 and key cycle 1162, correct?
Yes.
These events were prior to the testing triggers on odometer readings 12665/12666 and at key cycle 1160. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
You're
So what
sorry,
we're
that
saying,
report
what
came
you're saying
out.
in that report is the triggering events were at 1162, going in reverse in order. 1162 comes before 1164. They're numerical. Is that right?
Yes.
Every single key cycle just tags another number on top of it, right? There's no formula.
Correct.
After 1 comes 2, after 2 comes 3, 4, 5, 6, and then move on, right?
Yes.
So by the time you got the vehicle, there had been 1,164 key cycles on the history of that car, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you knew, and you put in your report, the triggering events that you see under 1164, those are yours. And clear that you recorded, that you talked to Mr. Lally about, were 2,
Yes.
meaning ignition cycles at least, right?
Yes.
Stated in your report, well, let me finish. And the triggers that occurred while testing was 36 miles. You just said that, right?
Yes.
And the key cycle difference was exactly 2 key cycles, right?
Yes.
1164, 1163, 1162. That's the triggering events, correct?
That's correct.
You also reiterated in your report in paragraph 23, 24, 26, and 29, and also in this exhibit in your CARS report, that the triggers occurred at key cycle 1162, right?
Yes.
You were assisted in your CARS report. I think you mentioned Trooper Zach Clark. Is that right?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor assisted to a certain degree, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Larini, Carol Larini, is that right?
Yes.
Also, Sergeant Sean Good, Canton PD, assisted as well, correct?
Yes, in a sense.
Did they all read the report before it was finalized?
No.
Did you have any supervisor read the report before it was finalized?
Yes.
And he agreed with the assessments in the report?
Yes.
So in summary, everybody that read the report and you who authored the report believed, and it's reflected in that report, that key cycle 1162 contained the 2 triggers that you're talking about, right?
Yes.
That's the 3-point turn, I guess now a 3-point turn, right? Changing direction, and then
Yes.
the reverse at 24 miles per hour, correct?
Correct.
And you even went on and testified to that exact thing under oath for the state grand jury, correct?
Yes. Wait, hold on. I need the text streams?
On the key cycles.
Not in grand jury.
Okay. Testified to it on direct examination on Friday and again this morning.
Yes, correct.
If your testing occurred at key cycle 1164, that means you turned the engine on, the ignition on to start your testing, correct?
Correct.
And that triggering event that we see up there at 1164 initiated your testing, all right?
Yes.
So that 1164 is where that's where there's no more unknowns, in other words. Right? You know exactly where the car is, who's in the car, who turned the car on, and what the triggering events were and what they reflected, because you did it, correct?
Correct.
It's you.
Yes.
So that would be the cornerstone, basically, of your entire analysis of key cycles.
Say again.
The cornerstone, in
Like-
other words, the one known that is immovable, it's immutable, is 1164 began your
Yeah, I know.
testing. Is that right?
Objection.
Is that right? I'm going to allow the question.
Could have
Yeah, that's when the car was in state custody.
could have subpoenaed somebody from Toyota.
So starting at 1164 and counting backward, before you started your testing, you know that the SUV had to be started, the ignition had to be turned over, and it was driven to the Sally Port in Canton at 5:31
Here we-
p.m.
yeah,
from a tow
yeah.
truck on January 29th, correct?
I didn't know that.
You did or did not?
Did not know that.
Okay. Assuming
Oh,
that
boy.
the car had to be started and put on a tow truck, that would be key cycle what?
I don't know how. I can't speak to the fact that
Oh,
that recorded a key cycle at that time.
I can't hear.
I can't speak to the fact that would record a key cycle at that time.
Okay. If the car was turned on and driven onto a tow truck, would that be a key cycle?
I don't know because these keys record different ways, so I can't speak to
oh
how
fucking,
or why
this
it did
is
not
disaster.
record on there.
This is a
All I
disaster.
can speak to is that those are the key cycles. The odometer mileage is
But you're saying
is more what I was
somebody
going after on
missing
this whole
them.
thing.
Trooper
Oh my
Paul, you just said unequivocally, when a car is turned on and then turned off, there's a key cycle.
I said when the car without the ignition on, that's a key cycle.
Right.
That's correct.
That's what I
Yeah.
mean, when it's turned on, when the engine turns on.
That's the definition of what it is. I can't speak to why it didn't go on, why it did not record.
Well,
Oh my God. Oh fuck. So that was his work. So you're saying it didn't record? Are you saying we're missing?
before 1164. Okay.
Okay.
Obviously, the car had to get to Canton PD because you saw it there, correct?
Correct.
Assume for purposes of my question, the car was turned on and there's a video of it turning on, driving up onto a flatbed tow truck.
Yes.
That would be ignition cycle. I mean, use your word, key cycle, ignition cycle, 1163, correct?
Again, ignition cycle, key cycles are two different things.
Which word do you want me to use?
If you want to talk about key cycles, key cycles. If you want to talk about ignition cycles, it's ignition cycles when the vehicle gets turned on. A key cycle does not mean to be turned on.
But every single ignition cycle includes a key cycle. You can't have an ignition cycle without a key cycle, correct?
Well, if you want to talk about it, just use the key cycles or ignition cycles. I'm trying to make sure this gets out. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make sure that this gets put out the correct way.
Every ignition cycle includes a key cycle, correct?
In a sense,
By definition, it has to.
it doesn't have to. They record multiple different ways.
You can have an ignition cycle without a key cycle.
I don't know how it recorded, but it could happen.
Explain that. How could that possibly happen?
Because a key cycle is when it turns on, not engine running,
Right.
and then turns off.
Okay, so work with me here.
Ignition cycle is when it turns on,
Right. And
engine
when
running
it
for
was
2
in the hands
seconds,
of Trooper Proctor
and then comes off.
Okay,
and going to the Lolliport.
For the 2 seconds, if it's not on long enough, it might not record one.
This is a mess.
okay, let's ignore the 2 seconds.
Okay.
That's not what we're doing.
Okay.
All right. Let's assume that it's an old-fashioned type of key.
Okay.
Halfway on.
Jackson's actually going easy on him.
Called ACC.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
That's a key cycle, correct?
For that intensive purpose, yes. But this vehicle's not a key cycle, so not a
Then you
thing.
keep turning.
Okay.
And that turns the engine on, right?
It turns engine on, correct?
An ignition cycle.
Yes. Well, then turns
Every
off.
single ignition cycle necessarily includes the precursor key cycle, correct? Even though every key cycle might not include.
Yeah,
an ignition
It's not that complicated. This dude's
In
just
that scenario, yes.
being evasive.
Fine. Okay, with that definition, I'm going to talk about ignition cycles because I don't want to get confused about accessories. Just assume the engine.
Okay.
turns on, right?
Okay.
If you started your testing at 1164, then if the engine was turned on, thereby initiating a key cycle, driving the car onto a flatbed truck, and then hauling it over to Canton PD, that would be key cycle 1163. Not
Mhm.
hypothetical, correct?
It could be.
Okay. Then going backward from there, if the SUV.
So Fender,
is-
what
I'm
the
sorry,
way,
let
the
me-
way I'm understanding this is anytime you turn the ignition on for the car, like start the car, that starts a new key cycle or a new key cycle, right? This is the way I'm interpreting it. That starts a new key cycle. However, not every new key cycle has to be started due to the ignition, right? It seems like there's key cycles that will happen within, let's say that you turn the car on and go for a 5-hour drive, right? So when you turn the car on, that would start a key cycle and an ignition cycle. But then while you're still driving for the 5 hours, say, there wouldn't be any more ignition cycles because the car's on the whole time, but there would be key cycles within that. So every ignition cycle, if the way I understand this, every ignition cycle is also a key cycle, but not every key cycle is also an ignition cycle, if that makes sense.
Let me add one event that I just forgot. It had to get off the tow truck
Right.
in Canton and be driven into the Sally Port. Did you ever see that video?
No.
Being driven in.
No.
If there was a video
Oh,
showing that the car was
Fender.
actually driven into the Sally Port, that would necessarily be a key cycle, correct?
Possibly.
You're all good.
So
You're
that
all
would be
good.
a Key cycle
You're all good.
1163. My mistake. I was missing one.
I mean, it is
Okay.
confusing.
Before
It is
that-
confusing.
If the car was turned on and driven onto the flatbed to get to Canton, that would be key cycle 1162 in order, correct? We're going back.
It's possible.
All right.
How did your interview go, Fender?
Before that, if the car was started and the car was driven from One Meadows Avenue to Karen Reed's parents' home in Dighton, that would be another key cycle, 1161, correct?
They're possible.
Before that, if the SUV was started and driven by Miss Reed from the garage at John O'Keefe's house to Jennifer McCabe's house at 5:07 in the morning, that would be another key cycle, correct? 1160. Is that right?
It's possible.
And before that, if the SUV was started and driven by Ms. Reed to the waterfall, from the waterfall to 34 Fairview at approximately 12:15 a.m., that would be another key cycle, 1159, right?
It's possible.
I want to be clear. The reason that these numbers skip in your diagram, they don't go directly in order, right? Not every single number is in order on this left-hand column, because this is only a diagram of when triggering events occur, right?
Yes.
Something unusual about the operation of the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And it's clear that from the data, there was no triggering event at key cycle 1159, was there?
No.
So assuming the driving events that I just told you, right? Assuming for purposes of my question, that the driving events started at 11:59, driving over to 34 Fairview from the waterfall, then driving at 5:07 in the morning over to Jen McCabe's house, 11:60, then driving to Dighton, her parents' house, 11:61, then the car being seized in Dighton by Trooper Proctor, 11:62, then the car being taken off the flatbed and driven into the Sallyport, Canton, 11:63. Your testing starts at 11:64. That would mean that at 11:62, that key cycle would include the time in which Trooper Proctor had possession of that car, correct?
No.
Assuming my hypothetical.
Your hypothetical?
Yes.
If that's hypothetically how it works, then yes.
Then what?
If that's hypothetically how it works, then yes.
On June 9th, 2022, you were asked by a grand jury whether you knew or had done any scientific testing to determine the distance a body would actually travel struck by a vehicle. Remember that?
Not that specifically. Not in that way.
Do you remember answering that you had not, I'm just paraphrasing, that you had not done you hadn't finished your report yet?
Why don't you show him? He said he didn't remember it that way.
Grand jury testimony. Let's see it. Oh, awesome, Fender. I'm happy to hear that. Awesome. We'll be rooting for you. If anyone knows what this number is, I tried to find it. I can't find it. If anyone knows, let me know in the chat. Because I've lost count after like 60 something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Take a look at middle of the page. Your answer starts at about line 12, but the question above it is probably informative. You have that in mind?
Yep.
May I approach?
Yes.
You were asked, does that remind you that you were asked by a grand jury if you could calculate how far a body would move having been struck by a vehicle?
Yes.
And you indicated, quote, yeah, there's certain calculations we can do with that, but figure out if the car backed up, hit somebody, and then they go a certain amount of distance, and it's based on miles per hour, the speed of the vehicle, the striking vehicle, and stuff. Remember saying that?
Yes.
What did you mean by stuff?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You said that the calculations would be based on miles per hour and stuff. Did you ever do any stuff to test that? That's the grand jury's question.
No, we cannot calculate anything from this collision.
Say that one more time.
We cannot calculate anything from this collision.
Who's we?
Sorry, me, the role we, me.
Well, you know John O'Keefe's weight, right?
What's that?
You know John O'Keefe's weight, 217 pounds, right?
Yes.
Did you know that?
I don't know his weight, no.
You know the weight of the vehicle?
Yes.
What's the weight of the vehicle, gross weight?
What's the gross weight?
Yeah.
I think it's approximately 7,300 pounds.
Where Were you able to calculate the mass of the vehicle?
I did not calculate the mass of the vehicle.
Well, you told the grand jury that you were planning on doing that kind of stuff to calculate how far a person would travel being struck at that speed with a car of that weight. You didn't do those calculations?
No, because the calculations would vastly underestimate the speed of the vehicle.
You testified, again, my report isn't done yet. I'm going to look into it. I'm looking into all that stuff, end quote, correct?
Yes.
There's that word again. It's been more than 2 years since that statement at the grand jury. Is your report finished?
Yes, it is.
Did you engage in any of those calculations?
I looked into it. This type of collision I would not be able to use the formulas for this type of collision.
Well, let's talk about
my
those formulas.
God.
How would you calculate how far a body at rest would travel after being struck by an object in motion? How would you calculate that?
In pedestrian collisions, I use a Searle formula, Searle throw formula.
What formula?
Searle,
What does that mean?
it's a type of formula that we use for a calculation of post-impact
So
or
that's-
speeds for pedestrians.
that includes certain principles of physics to calculate that, right?
What do you mean?
I'm sorry?
What do you mean by certain forms of physics?
He doesn't know what physics is.
There would be physics calculations.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
to
It's a
figure out
mess.
how far a body at
It's a
rest
mess.
would
Oh,
move
the stuff.
having been
He uses stuff.
struck by an object in
things.
motion.
Right.
That's a basic principle.
Yeah, I guess you could say though.
He was like this on direct too,
Can you
guys.
describe for the jurors exactly what calculations you would need to employ to determine how far a body at rest would travel, having been struck by an object in motion.
So in this scenario, in this collision,
It's probably
it's
the
more of a
worst
side swipe.
that maybe
So you did
I've
not
seen.
attain.
Supposed to be an expert.
You did not get enough speed of the vehicle post-impact with the vehicle to be able calculations. His center of mass was offset from the vehicle. So we would vastly underestimate his speed. So that's why I did not do a formula. If he was more in line with behind the vehicle, he would have been projected forward, and using that projection forward, he would have been able to get more closer to the actual speed of the vehicle during that post-impact travels.
Well, that presumes a couple things, Paul. That presumes that he was quote unquote sideswiped, right?
Presumed,
Presumed by you. You didn't see how he was hit, did you?
based on the evidence, it appeared to be a side swipe.
That's your opinion.
That's just reading the evidence.
You're saying that the principles of physics as we know them today in modern mathematics is thwarted by a sideswipe?
Objection.
Is that what you're saying?
It's the calculations that are out there. You can get a speed, it'll just underestimate the speed.
Calculations that are out there.
You would have to know what the initial momentum of the object is that's in motion, correct?
Of what object?
The truck. Paul.
I would have to know that speed.
Yeah, you'd have to know what the initial momentum is, not speed, momentum. There's a difference,
Okay.
right? Would you agree with that?
No.
You wouldn't have to calculate.
For anyone who
What
wasn't
initial-
aware, Alan Jackson, before he was an attorney, was a mechanic, an Air Force mechanic working on airplanes or jets.
Momentum is
For the Air Force.
of the object in motion.
So he probably, I think he understands this shit better than
This distance of the body at rest would move.
Well, in that sense, are we talking about trying to find the speed of the vehicle? That's usually what we're trying to do.
Right, okay, well, let's put the speed of the vehicle aside. Let's talk about initial momentum. What's the formula for calculating initial momentum?
There's different types of momentum formulas.
Well, there's actually one type of momentum formula. It's to calculate momentum.
Objection.
Sustained.
To calculate momentum, there is a
So
singular.
sustained. Ask it differently.
Isn't it true, Trooper Paul, that there is a singular calculation for determining initial momentum? That is P equals M times V, where P is the momentum. You're solving for that. M is mass. You multiply that by velocity. Is that right? Pretty simple.
You wouldn't use that in a pedestrian collision.
Oh, because the pedestrian's somehow magically out of the realm of physics?
Objection.
Sustained.
Is a pedestrian out of the realm of physics and calculations?
No, it's the weight differential between the pedestrian and the vehicle.
So if the vehicle is too heavy and the body is too light, you can't calculate the initial momentum of the vehicle?
Hi, Patricia.
Yes.
Happy to see you.
It's in my math class. We don't use momentum for a vehicle to vehicle.
Math class?
The crash reconstruction classes I have taken.
Got it. Would you need to apply the theory of conservation of momentum in calculating these data?
Do I need to calculate the conservation of momentum?
Or calculation, of conservation of momentum?
Yes.
You know what that is? There's an equation for that as well, right?
Yes.
You know what that is?
Not off the top of my head, but yes.
Or what? Wait, what? Wait, what? Oh my God, what a mess. Not off the top.
Based on the basic principles of physics, is the total momentum of the collision greater or less than the total momentum after the collision? Total momentum before the collision, is it greater or less?
He's
than total
Massachusetts
momentum
State
after?
Police, Candace. Or I guess you mean who's hiring him for the police? Yeah.
What type of collision?
Trooper Paul, they're exactly equal in all respects under the principles of physics, right? That's the theory of the conservation of momentum. Momentum doesn't
See,
change.
Jackson knows all this shit.
Yes.
Transferred from one body to another,
Yes,
correct?
correct.
Why didn't you say that to the jurors?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
That's a great point, Fender.
Trooper Paul, if you
That
were
was sustained for
qualified
being argumentative.
to quote look into all this stuff, you would probably know these
I
answers.
love that Jackson used the
Objection.
word stuff. Quoting the
Are there any
witness.
other calculations that you need to figure out the stuff that you were talking to about?
Jackson, yes.
Sustained.
How about calculating the final velocity of the objects after the collision? Would that be important?
What objects?
That would be John O'Keefe's body, sir.
You-
Object
I don't.
that you claim was flying
Wow.
in the air 30 feet.
Okay,
Objection.
sustained.
How about calculating the displacement using kinematic equations? Would you be able to do that?
The displacement of the body.
In order to calculate how far the body would move based on the mass of the object striking the body, could you use displacement using kinematic equations?
So, like I said before, the side swipe, he would not have gotten 100% of the vehicle, 100% of the speed of the striking vehicle. It would have vastly underestimated this vehicle. You couldn't hit a person and side swipe them, spin them off to the side, and have that and get a speed from those calculations.
So you're saying that the discipline of physics cannot figure out how far John O'Keefe's body would move, but you
Wow.
personally
Wow.
figured out that he would have flown now somewhat or been projected somewhat 30 feet.
Objection.
All right?
Sustained.
Are you saying that the principles of physics are incapable of determining with the proper calculations how far John O'Keefe's body would have moved given the
Basically.
collision at issue?
Objection.
Is that what you're saying, Trooper?
No.
Okay, next question.
Patricia,
I said because it was a sideswipe, all these calculations, these physics.
it's a great point, Patricia. And here's the thing. They usually do. They usually do. When it comes to expert witnesses, there's a whole set of rules that apply that make them different from lay witnesses. Now, having said that, I haven't heard them tender anybody as an expert officially, which is weird. However, we've referred to as Terry Kuhn, we've called her the dog lady. Terry Kuhn, she was early on in the trial. Everyone's kind of referred to her as an expert. There was also the lady before him who did the cell phone forensics. People called her an expert, and the same with this guy, Trooper Paul, people calling him an expert, but they haven't actually officially tendered anybody as an expert. But when they do, there's certain rules that apply. They can rely on hearsay. They can make opinions based on information from other experts. They can weigh in on that. And they can use notes. Now, having said that, another interesting thing about this trial, among many, is that even with like non-expert witnesses, like for example, the treating ER docs, that was a great example. That dude, the judge actually asked him to use his notes and read from his notes, which is bizarre because usually it's a big deal to get to use your notes at all. But the way that it works is that you get to read it to refresh your memory. You can't read from it. But Judge Bev literally asked him, why don't you just read it off your notes, which was insane. But anyway, my point is like, so how it typically would work, right, with an expert witness is they bring their notes with them or their report, whatever it is, their opinion, and they can look at it to refresh their memory when it comes to things like dates, numbers, data, that type of thing. And this guy didn't have it. He just didn't bring any of it. And that, maybe it's on purpose. Maybe it's for plausible deniability. So we can be like, yeah, I just don't remember, blah, blah. Because if he had it with him, then he would have to look at it. And, then it's, I don't know. It is weird. He should be able to have that on the up there with him. And if it was, you never know. Judge Bev might even direct him the way she did with that ER doctor. Oh, why don't you just read from it? Even though, again, that's very bizarre. Right. Fender makes a great point. Alan roasted him on this on Friday. How did he not memorize it over the weekend? Yep. Kuhn was not a fact witness. She tested the DNA for dog DNA on the shirt. And one way you can usually tell too is if they bring in somebody from another state, right? She lives in California, like UC Davis, California. So they must have brought her in from California. So has nothing to do with Massachusetts. Thank you. I'm glad you remembered her name. Thank you, because I couldn't remember her name. And I agree. She did know her shit. She was very, very qualified. Yep. Yeah. Fender says, you say interesting. You mean insane? Yes, absolutely. Go ahead and you can use those interchangeably in this case for sure. Yeah, it's still, I've literally never seen that before. Usually they're just, they keep a tight leash on people reading. Now, he was the dude who also seemed like he might have been hungover, or, I mean, he didn't know. So I guess that was a mess too. But I agree. I completely agree for sure. Yeah. I know they haven't, it's wild. It's wild. And the other thing is too, is you never see people tender someone as an expert. Again, they haven't tendered anybody, but it's crazy because he works for the Massachusetts State Police. Expert witnesses are always like third party, like unbiased, right? Like I said, they usually bring them in from other states. Or if they bring in someone who's law enforcement, it's from a completely other state, right? Like Kenny Kinsey brought in Murdaugh. I mean, there's so many examples, right? But you don't bring in somebody from the same group of law enforcement officers, especially don't do it when you're being accused by the defense of there being corruption or a cover up or anything like that. But yet you're only bringing in more people from the same department. It's just, it's even just strategic wise, it's like, it's just a terrible move, right?
Calculations are inapplicable, right?
What I'm saying, I would underestimate the speed and the distance.
The truth is, Trooper Paul, you have no idea what all these physics calculations mean, do you?
Objection.
Sustained.
You've not been trained in physics,
How is-
have you?
Yes,
You have been,
it's incorporated into the classes.
right? You have a few
His little classes he took.
You haven't been formally trained in physics, have you?
Objection.
Sustained.
Yeah,
You haven't been
right,
formally
Fender.
trained in kinematics, correct?
It's in the aspects of all their crash reconstruction classes.
You haven't been formally trained and hold no degrees in biomechanics, do you?
I do not have a degree in biomechanics.
And you know they're going to bring in
In
experts.
fact,
We'll find out tomorrow.
basically what you did in this case was calculated emission cycles. And you got those wrong, right?
Objection.
Sustained. Come on, Mr. Jackson. Ask the appropriate part of the question and you'll get it.
Argumentative is why.
Let me ask you this. Based on your reconstruction, nearly 2-year investigation, exactly how was that taillight shattered? Explain it to us.
Good question.
How does the taillight? What do you mean? It got
Oh,
so the taillight in this case was shattered when it was struck John O'Keefe's arm.
I can't.
Exactly what part of his arm?
What?
Based on what I saw for his injuries was from the
Okay, so here's why he's saying this, because as I've pointed out all along, there's a huge problem with the fact that a taillight is about mid-level, like hip level, and John O'Keefe was over 6 feet tall. And so, but this was the first time we've heard anybody say it. Of course, we've not heard from any, y'all know that, but this is the first time we've heard, so this is a new part to the theory, that the taillight was cracked because of John O'Keefe's arm? You've got to be kidding me. I thought that the Commonwealth was trying to suggest that the injury to the back of his head was caused from the taillight. So if they're saying it's the arm, then what happened to his head? Because it's a laceration. It's not just like hitting the road. If any of this was even remotely accurate, it still wouldn't make any sense. This is insane. This is, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is, the arm cracked the taillight. And then that's what he would, I'm sure that's where he's going with this. This is crazy.
upper part of his arm down.
Just when you think it can't get worse in this
His
case,
arm out. It just struck the arm. Like a
he's
hinge
not going to fucking know.
in front of him. You did the reconstruction.
It look,
Here's exactly how his body was positioned when he was struck by that.
so it looks like his arm is more kind of like this. If I can try to get that.
You're indicating
How
outside
are the-
side, correct?
This is speculation.
The taillight would
You-
have struck, right?
Yes.
Not his torso.
How do you know?
Yes.
Oh my God.
So
Oh my God.
the full mass, the full weight of that truck hit him basically at the elbow. Is that right?
No,
Missing his
no.
torso.
I said it. Yeah, from upper part of the arm
Right,
down.
the
Yeah.
elbow and the biceps.
I didn't see anything that shows an indication that this lower torso was struck, but
Okay. So his
not-
torso
it's not saying
He's
there's not
trying to
been a
explain that, but
possibility,
there's
but
just
I
not a
didn't
good
see anything.
solution.
So
And there's a
his torso
reason
was
there's not a good
spared
solution.
from being hit, but the arm took the brunt, the full force of the vehicle, correct?
like arm and shoulder. Yes.
No, Candace, there
You
were
said
not.
He then did a spin, like a sort of pirouette.
He got spun around counter. Possibly the way he struck, it looked like it could have turned around counterclockwise.
Okay. So if it turns
No,
around
his arm's not
counterclockwise,
broken.
turn around in the air
Guys, I
counterclockwise?
know. I know.
Yes,
Okay.
initially.
So it gets hit on the upper biceps, shoulder area, and down to the forearm
Yes,
by an unbroken taillight, right?
yes.
In other words, it's nice.
Right, because right.
No shards
So
of-
here's where he's going with this. This is a good point. Where he's going with this, I believe, is that oh, fuck. If he's saying that the way the taillight was cracked was by hitting the arm, that means the taillight was not cracked, right? When the arm hit it, the taillight was intact. So you have to pick one. Either you're going to say that the arm broke the taillight, which is implausible, right? Or you can say that the taillight was already broken and had cracks in it and jagged edges, and then that's how the arm got scratched. But you can't have both. That's what I think is going to happen here.
Or anything broken at the time that it made contact with his arm, right?
Correct.
Okay. So how did his arm get all cut up?
Because when his arm struck the taillight then cracked. And as the car driving past him, the taillight could scratch it.
Got it. So he gets hit by the car, not his torso, just the arm. The taillight cracks. And as it passes by, his arm stays with it long enough to get
Interesting,
striations,
Patricia.
those scratches.
Did she have a laceration on the back of her head?
Right.
In a sense, yes.
And at the same time, he does a pirouette and flies
Another great point, Fen.
30 feet.
Yeah.
His final point of rest.
I don't know
Oh.
if he did a pirouette.
Well, I'm using the word pirouette. He spun around.
Right, of course, because
He
then
started rotating counterclockwise. I don't know how far he ran
Oh my
counterclockwise,
God.
but he started rotating.
this is
According to that, would push him to rotate
He's using a lot
counterclockwise.
of
So now he went
imagining.
counterclockwise all the way to his back toward the ground. It seems like a most likely possibility.
Did you account for the fact that his arm is on a hinge?
Is what? Say again?
Did you account for the fact in this scenario that you just told the jurors that his arm is on a hinge?
On a
It's called
hinge.
Shoulder.
Okay.
Right? So the arm got hit. Didn't his arm just swing?
I said arm and shoulder area, so his arm could have been considered part of it.
Even if his shoulder got the upper,
Okay.
you're pointing to his upper biceps.
Mhm.
Right? There's no injuries on his shoulder, not a single one, not even a bruise. Right?
Like I said, it looked like to me it was from up here. I don't know how far I can
I'm
back here, but it was up here.
Well,
So
you're the one that
I'm sorry,
that
Patricia.
touched his arm.
yes.
That's limited to about mid biceps, to about mid forearm, correct?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Patricia, that this happened to your sister. I am curious though, what details when you say it was the same, like was she standing and then backed into with like by a car? Like I'm curious, like if there were any differences in what this, because this is actually helpful, right, in terms of real life experience and what would happen. So yeah.
Right?
Yes.
No injuries on the shoulder, no injuries on the torso, no injuries on the ribs, no injuries on the back, correct? Is that right?
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So your theory
Yeah.
is you got hit on the arm, took the brunt of the
Yeah.
force from the taillight on the arm, stayed with the
So the head injury was from hitting the ground,
taillight to explode, basically to shatter.
but that makes sense.
Striations get
I
on his
mean,
arm.
this is one of the problems here, right? Because we all know someone's standing and they get hit by a car and the person standing, they're going to have injuries below the neck, right? I mean, that's one of the main problems. Well, there's so many, but one of the problems with this case.
Does a pirouette, spin counterclockwise. He flies 30 feet in the air to his point of rest.
Yeah.
Nice
Probably
30.
a little faster than that though.
Flies 30 feet in the air.
Actually said he hit his head on the curb.
I said that's one of the possibilities of
Oh,
when you look at the roadway as he gets spun around counterclockwise.
I thought there wasn't
It's
a
a possibility that the curb is there.
I thought there wasn't a
Any blunt
curve.
force
I thought
object
there
on the
wasn't a
ground,
curve.
that's
That came up
ground
a
is
whole lot at the beginning
very
of the
blunt.
trial.
Well, except in your
Oh.
scenario, you just told us he flew through the air onto the
I thought there wasn't a curve.
snow, grass, and dirt.
I didn't say through the air.
Say that again.
I didn't say he got thrown through the air.
Okay, I'll use your word. You got projected.
Projected doesn't mean it's not incorporating just the throw. Projected just means you get pushed forward. There's two
30
parts of that.
feet,
It's
dude.
the air, then there's the ground. Like I said earlier, the tumbling, the rolling, whatever that part of the crash would happen. Projecting is just what we call what happens to a pedestrian post impact with the crash.
Okay, so a couple questions. If his arm, elbow took the brunt of that entire impact, how do you account for the fact that he didn't suffer a broken bone?
I don't know.
How do you account for the fact that he didn't have a fracture?
Here.
Objection.
He didn't have a
Sustained.
fracture.
How do you account for the fact that he didn't even have a bruise on the arm?
Objection.
That's sustained too.
They were approaching.
Yes.
Okay. So while they're approaching, so yeah, Patricia, so everything you're saying makes sense, right? Like that if you get hit by the car, like someone, the momentum making someone go fly through like we know this happens in car accidents, right, with pedestrians, where and then they might hit their head or on the road or whatever, right? But the problem here, like we were saying, is like he didn't have any injuries to anything below like his arm and neck. Everything was arm and head, right? But also, as y'all know, I accidentally saw the pictures of the head injuries completely on accident and saw the laceration. And the laceration is very specific to the back of the head. It's 100%. It's not a blunt force. It's very specific. It's deep and it's wide. And so it was something that caused that was like created like head injury it was like sharper than a knife, right? Like in other words, there was more weight to it than a knife, but it was also able to lacerate. So that, to me, having seen it on accident, does not look like he fell and hit his head on the ground, say. Now, it could be like the top of that fire hydrant. From seeing the pictures, that looks like that could have been potentially what caused it. Or maybe Higgins' snowplow edge, maybe. Those are some of the things I'm thinking. The Commonwealth has not offered an explanation to that.
The truth is,
Maybe the medical examiner would be able to elaborate. I'm sure they would.
having investigated auto pedestrian.
Yes, we can listen on one time.
John O'Keefe's injuries do not look anything like an automobile pedestrian accident, do they?
Yes, they do.
Isn't it true, Trooper Paul?
Right.
You came to these opinions and conclusions because Trooper Proctor told you to come to these opinions and conclusions in furtherance of his investigation.
That is not true.
That's why you have these
Road rash
that just don't make sense, correct?
That is not true.
And you're just trying to fit a
And I've had road rash,
into a round hole.
and it does not look like what John's
Sustained.
arm injuries.
All
Wow.
right, jurors will take the morning recess.
Oh, fuck. Okay. Wow. All right. Here we go. So let me.
Rise for the court, please.
So that's it. So then.
I'll
Okay.
see counsel at sidebar about scheduling.
All right.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Now, with regard to your testimony as far as that triggering event, or the two events on 12,629B, you testified that that was consistent with the pedestrian collision, is that correct?
That's correct.
Again, if you could tell the jury, why is that consistent with the pedestrian?
The one specifically with the speeds and everything that we're referring to.
24.2 miles per hour in reverse for about
Right.
60 feet.
Okay, yeah. So why I think that's consistent with a pedestrian strike is because of the sudden change in the speed. It drops down by half mile per hour. The accelerator pedal is staying constant at the same percentage, and the steering wheel angle also turns to the right.
Now, your overall opinion is based on what you did as far as your construction, correct?
Oh, she hit
Yes.
her head on a deck.
Your information
Okay.
that you
Okay.
had, at your disposal in formulating your.
So Patricia, I'm so sorry that you were a witness to this. Although in a way it might have been a good thing if there was any, criminal charges brought forth or a civil lawsuit. But that makes sense in this case because you're saying her head hit the deck, and okay, so it hit something, right? Like it hit something that would have had that makes sense. But there wasn't anything. Well, from what the Commonwealth was offering, there wouldn't have been anything like that in this case, though. For him to hit his head on yeah, I have no idea, but let me speed it up because Lolly. I wonder, let's see. Okay, hold on.
Like from other reports and stuff?
Yes,
Yes,
and that would include physical evidence, is that correct?
correct.
And that would include witness statements, correct?
Objection.
Sustain as to form.
Oh, they go on to
anything else
next
with that?
witness.
Uh,
Y'all want to jump to
roadway
the
evidence,
next witness?
witness statements.
And witness statements.
Let me
is that
know. Do y'all
also-
want to jump to the next witness, or do you want to jump
Correct.
to the
Are
cross?
you aware that the defendant indicated in a statement to troopers
Okay.
that conducted a three-point turn in the area of 34 Fairview Road?
I'm going to allow that question.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I mean,
observed
from what
that-
we hear from all the different experts, people like it's like a thing. They're like, yeah, you always lose your shoes, like when but usually it's both.
triggering event, is that from that mileage, is that consistent with the defendant's own statement?
Yes, it is.
Now,
Yeah.
let me ask you a little bit, if you could, again, to the jury, clarify the difference between what you termed as an area of impact versus a point of impact.
Yes, an area impact is broader.
I
It's a
can't,
bigger
Wally.
area. Point to impact would mean something as a obviously right
We'll
there.
go over
that would
all
be
this
the
on the
area
recap,
impact.
but I'm going to jump ahead to recross.
If I could ask the
It's too
cell
hard,
phone that
Wally,
was
when I
located
can't-
under Mr. O'Keefe's,
at least with the
body,
recaps, I've
that
edited it
location,
for
is that also consistent with the linear.
content.
8 minutes.
And as far as,
8 minutes. I looked at the odometer mileage
and why would you look at the odometer mileage over the key cycles?
because I can physically see the odometer mileage at the vehicle at the
There
time
is.
of my inspection.
This is the end of redirect.
And why would, well, let me ask you this. In your opinion, as far as that is concerned, sort of backtracking to a specific location, which is more reliable, the odometer or the key cycles?
I would say the odometer mileage.
This is
Why?
stupid. Ask a Toyota.
Like I said, you
Screen
physically see
expert
it when you turn the car,
who
and I
does
know that's the
this.
odometer mileage that it's reading on the dashboard.
And every key cycle, is that necessarily reported within the tech stream data?
No,
And why not?
Then why are we relying on
it
it?
only records stuff that related to the triggers.
And how does he even know? He doesn't. He
They don't
literally had
what?
never heard of this.
They only record stuff
Screen.
that is related to the triggers.
Okay, thank you.
He never had heard of this.
As far as counsel's hypothetical with regard to the key cycles, is it your opinion that that hypothetical is accurate or inaccurate?
Inaccurate,
And why so?
because it also be you also add the odometer mileage onto the key cycle. So those key cycles and odometer mileage are on the same trigger, and plus the data seems consistent with everything else that's going on with this collision.
Wait.
Now, fair to say that you were not outside of.
So he's like, my opinion is consistent with itself.
Around 12:20 to 12:30 a.m. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so fair to say that you don't know exactly how Mr. O'Keefe and/or Glass or anything that he was holding interacted with the defendant's vehicle at that time?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that true?
I do not.
And so based on your training and experience and the number of pedestrian crashes that you've investigated, again, if you could, one last time, just describe to the jury how you believe the vehicle interacted with Mr. O'Keefe and why.
Objection.
Sustained. It's asked and answered.
Yeah.
With reference to what you've described as far as the interaction between Mr. O'Keefe and the vehicle, why is that your opinion?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Based on the evidence from the vehicle, based on the injuries to John O'Keefe, the taillight appears to be broken and it's sharp plastic pieces that could have ripped his arm, and also the dent with the scratches above it is consistent with a hand holding a glass and the glass on top smashing on the vehicle, and the hand smashing the vehicle. You can see there's a line between scratches and a dent there.
That just Romeo. Very briefly.
Oh,
I just
let me
wanted to
fix my
make
thing.
sure I clear something up about the key cycles. You're not suggesting that every key cycle in the history of cars on this page, correct?
Right.
That's correct.
I'm pulling up Exhibit 591.
Okay.
That indicates key cycles that have triggering events, correct?
Yes.
Triggering events.
Hold on. I've got you. Don't worry, Fender.
There's no evidence of anything in this case.
There we go.
Are something that the manufacturer includes, in basically a list of items that will be a trigger.
Yeah, Toyota, but yes.
Yes.
It's a
The defense
list of
probably
items
will.
basically for mechanics to figure out if there's some unusual driving or unusual event with the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
But the key cycles go in order. They're numerical, 1 through whatever.
Correct.
And the hypothetical that I gave you on cross-examination, with those driving incidents, each one of those would represent a key cycle, correct?
Mhm.
I don't. So, in your hypothetical, I mean, assume that it should create a key cycle, but that you can't just say that key cycle is from that because I didn't just use key cycles. I used the odometer mileage on top of it. So you have to have key cycle and odometer.
Right. Interestingly, though, when you testified on direct examination, you said your analysis, this was on Friday, before the weekend. By the way, over the weekend, did you watch anything on, I don't know, YouTube or any social media?
No,
Nothing.
no.
No. Did you have any conversations with Mr. Lally about these key cycles and problems?
No,
Did you have any conversations with anybody about the issues with the key cycles?
no.
Did you realize at some point between Friday and today that I was probably going to ask you some questions about key cycles?
Objection.
Did you realize that yourself?
I assumed you were going to ask me loads of information.
So on Friday, you didn't mention that your analysis was based on mileage, did you?
Objection.
Sustained.
On Friday, did you mention that your analysis was predicated on mileage?
Objection.
I'll see you at sidebar.
All right, skip the sidebar, drive the car to the sidebar. All right, they're almost done with the sidebar. Right. Surely, right? I know. There's much that could have been done that's not been done. I mean, that's really the thing. There's much that could have been done. They choose not to do it. They choose not to do the things. I think we see here every combination of intentionally skirting facts or questions, right? We also see laziness, incompetence, ignorance. I mean, it's bizarre, right? It's like the defense really seems to be on the side trying to figure it out, and the Commonwealth is fighting that. When they're supposed to be the ones
Yes.
explaining to the
Paul,
jury
on
what happened.
Friday, you indicated pretty clearly that your analysis was based on the key cycles, starting at 1164 when you started your testing, and 1162, which was the key cycle you claimed on Friday was at 34 Fairview.
It wasn't based on it. That's how I describe it. I said key cycles. I based it on they were close within proximity to each other, but I've always said it's key cycles and odometer mileage, plus all the information within the triggers themselves. So it wasn't just one of the other.
And you said on Friday that once you started your testing at 1164, it was 2 cycles earlier that had the triggering events, meaning 1162, that you claimed were at 34 Fairview.
Yes.
But in the hypothetical, if there were 4 events, 4 key cycle events between 1164 and 1159, it could not have occurred at 1162, correct? 34 Fairview, in my hypothetical.
In your hypothetical, if it recorded a key cycle, then your hypothetical is correct.
Right. And last question, if you got the route of travel incorrect, if your presumption of the route of travel was incorrect on that vehicle in the days earlier, then your mileage would be incorrect also, correct?
Mileage from what? The odometer or from
The odometer reading.
the odometer reading is odometer reading. It's 36.
My point is
Uh,
your analysis that's based on the odometer reading, 36 miles here, 12 miles there, 2 miles here, 5 miles there. If you got the route of travel wrong and the route of travel was different, your assumptions about the odometer readings would be incorrect. Is that
Yes.
correct?
That's
So what I'm
that was my very first problem
So
with
what
this
I'm-
from
what-
direct examination.
I purposely
That's
put
literally-
down a range on my Google
That's
images
literally what I said.
shown because I couldn't tell you her definitively route of path for every single way, but I know that it's possibly a possibility that she could travel 36 miles within those locations
The
that she
possibility
traveled
is not good enough.
post
This is a murder trial, dude.
leaving Fairview Road.
Or if that mileage was put on at key cycle
Oh my God.
1162, and that would mean the vehicle would already be in Massachusetts State Police custody, right? Into the proctor's custody.
Objection.
So that's beyond the scope.
That's all I have.
No.
All right, Mr. Lally?
Just very briefly.
The range that you came up with for the defendant's path of travel, does that fit with the path of travel, the odometer reading, putting the defendant's vehicle in the area of 34 Fairview Road when it does the 3-point turn, and then 8 minutes later when it travels 24.2 miles per hour in a straight line in reverse for approximately 62 feet?
See,
Yes.
Nothing further.
I think
I
that
do
could be
also.
her bumping into the vehicle, backing out of the driveway, doing the 3-point turn. That will have to come from one of their experts, but that's what I still think is what's going to be uncovered here, with someone who's way better at their job than this fellow was.
All right, so jurors, we're going to take another short break to set up some things in the court. Okay?
All rise for the court, please.
All right, so we're going to jump ahead. I love having the room to do this. And we have a new witness. Who do you guys think it's going to be?
Step right up. Step for me.
I mean, no, I'm still sticking with my original theory. Well, also.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give to the court and the jury in the matter now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Female.
Okay. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you shall give to the court in the matter now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
And if it's at all helpful, that microphone before you is adjustable. You can put it in any direction you wish. Just try to keep your voice up. Okay, sir?
Thank you.
Now, sir, could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Yes, it's Ian Whiffen. So IAN WHIFFIN.
And what is it that you do for work, sir?
I'm currently the decoding product manager at Cellbrite.
Oh,
And what is Cellbrite?
is he British?
Cellbrite is one of the world leaders in mobile forensics software.
And when you say forensic software, can you explain to the jury a little bit about sort of what is forensic software and how is it used, specifically your Cellbrite?
Yes, so forensic software is used to gain access to people's devices, cell phones primarily, to extract that data and to allow examiners to parse and decode that data to make sense of it in a more user-friendly way so that a report can be created for investigators.
Now, sir, if I could ask you just a few questions going back to some of your educational and prior work experience starting sort of with your undergraduate work, what, if any, where did you go to school and what, if any, degree did you receive then?
Okay, I didn't get a degree. I'm originally from the UK, where I did qualifications in computing, a higher national certificate in computing, and then joined the police.
Okay, I'm going to back it
in
up real quick
2004.
so I can get his name and spell it through the thing.
That was responsible.
Solemnly affirm that the
Okay, hold on.
testimony you shall
So,
give to the court in the matter now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Ian something.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
And if it's at all helpful, that microphone before you is adjustable. You can put it in any direction you wish. Just try to keep your voice up. Okay, sir?
Thank you.
Now, sir, could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Yes, it's Ian Whiffen. So IAN WHIFFIN.
And what is it
All
that
right,
you do
cool.
for work, sir?
I'm currently the decoding product manager at Cellbrite.
And what is Cellbrite?
Cellbrite is one of the world leaders in mobile forensics software.
Here we go.
And when you say forensic software, can you explain to the jury a little bit about sort of
Okay, I'm going to jump forward just a second. We heard some of this. I just went back.
Covering all manner of digital forensics to begin with. Throughout my 8 years with Calgary Police, I did constant courses each year to keep information updated, including a 2-week course, again, at the Canadian Police College in Ottawa, specifically about cell phone forensics. And then also during that time, additional courses for extracting data for interpreting internet artifacts or any other kind of information found on a phone or computer.
And following that, where did you go from there, sir?
In 2020, I left Calgary Police Service and began working at Cellbrite as the senior digital intelligence expert, where I would use my knowledge of the forensic community to assist the developers with creating and maintaining a program that examiners would want to use. And finally, about 2 years ago, I moved to the decoding product manager position.
can you explain to the jury sort of what it is, what your role is, and what is it that you do for something?
Yep. So right now in the position that I'm in, again, I use my knowledge of the digital forensics landscape in the community. I talk with users about their daily challenges, what applications are causing them problems, what they need to get access to, what they need to understand. And I take that information, create a priority list, and then determine with our developers what we will tackle, how we will tackle it, and how it will appear to the end user.
Now, with regard to your education in this area, what, if any, certifications do you have?
No specific certifications.
Well,
I've
I'm
done
glad
the
he's not
Cellbrite
from the Massachusetts
coursework
police.
since
We're
joining
like,
Cellbrite.
good
But other than the 3-week course in Ottawa, and then again the 2-week course in Ottawa, I don't have the SAMS training
It
or any of
changes.
that kind of training certifications.
Oh, that's cool, Patricia.
And
I love
in
it.
addition to
Oh,
your
look
work,
at this.
Cellbrite,
DSN.
what, if any, other
Happy to see you, my friend. DSN in the house.
I'm sorry, could you rephrase that?
Sure.
See, at first I thought it was some other, I was not expecting British. So first I thought it was like another dialect
Yes.
of
So
Boston.
since working as an
No.
examiner, I identified that there were times
He's
that I
British.
needed to parse artifacts from applications that main vendors
Actually-
didn't support. In response to that, I would do my own research. That research turned into a selection of digital forensics tools, and I created a website for myself to share that research, to share those tools with the community. And directly related to that, I have published articles related to accessing data on phones, related to
It's
SQL
almost
databases,
like Irish or
related to
Scottish.
various
Hi,
other
happy to see you, my friend.
artifacts, primarily locations.
Over the course of your work, have you
It's
had
not
any
like
to,
straight up
testify
British,
in
like from,
other,
well,
court
I know there's
situations
different
in this
versions,
specific
but
field?
Yes, related to digital forensics, I've testified approximately 20 times, mainly in Canada, but also once in Michigan, once in Australia, once in the UK.
Now, as far as
what do you guys think? Where specifically is this
questions that
accent?
come into your company with relation to
Yeah, so Patricia, if this is
data,
your accent, where are you from, my friend?
general forensic questions. What parts of the world do these questions come in from, and how widely used is your product?
So the product is used globally. There are a select number of countries that we don't export to, but generally, if a police service is interested in digital forensics, then they're using at least some of our tools. We operate an email address which is open to any user called Stumpers. And the idea is that users, if they come across a artifact that they can't explain, they can email to myself and some of my colleagues, and we can research that artifact, and we can try and give them an answer as to say why the artifact's there and how it should be interpreted.
Interesting.
You used the term in there as far as an artifact. If you could please explain to the jury sort of what your understanding of that term is and how it's used within your specific industry.
Yeah, so I would refer to an artifact as essentially any piece of data which I've recovered from the phone, which is of interest. It could be a web history visit. It could be a text message. It could be a photograph, any piece of information.
Now, sir, turning your attention to September of
what?
2023.
Here's
at
the
some
thing.
point in that month were you contacted by?
Here's the thing. We heard the word artifact used a whole lot with I forget her name. I know you, Patricia, you mentioned it earlier, but the expert, the cell phone expert lady, we heard her use artifact a lot. If they brought in another expert, quote unquote, again, they've not tendered him, just simply for the sole purpose of trying to say that Jen McCabe didn't make that Google search at that time, hostile and die in the snow, I'm going to lose my mind, because that will now be two witnesses devoted and designated specifically to address that one issue, which has nothing to do with Karen. Like, they can't, like, they've got to start talking about Karen's phone or John's phone, you know, the people involved. Like, what? Oh, okay. Thank you, Patricia. It's a North. Okay. That makes sense as to why it's a little bit different. I've got family that's British, and they're in a different part of England. So that makes sense as to why it sounded almost borderline, like maybe Irish or something in a way. Yeah, DSN, I was waiting for you to say this because you weren't there for the recap when we talked about it a lot, but I was like thinking to myself, like, oh man, DSN's going to be eating his words. I knew it. Yeah, but it's a good thing, right? Because you know, for anyone who missed it, DSN was like, oh, like, I don't know. I think maybe there's something to this, and maybe Karen did hit him or whatever. And I'm like, just wait, because we hadn't gone through it yet, but we talked about it at the recap the other day, and didn't watch it, but we talked about it. And of course, even if you didn't see that, just seeing this cross is enough there. Yeah, Northwest England. So yeah, it's an important thing though, right? Like, at least DSN could admit that he was wrong about something, unlike many of these other experts, right? Trooper Paul never once admitted he was wrong.
Eventually, yes. Initially, I was contacted by a member of Cellbrite.
And if you know why was that initial, as far as the initial contact, initial request from Cellbrite, can you speak about that?
My understanding was there was an artifact found on a device, and people were looking for an explanation as to how this particular timestamp was relevant to the
This
case.
is going to be Jen McCabe. I can't fucking, I'm going to fall over. You guys, I'm going to fall
If
the
you
fuck
could explain
over.
to the jury sort of what you,
This can't be happening.
and what would you ask?
This can't be happening.
So
This is not about,
the original question is just basically how can we explain this 227 timestamp?
yep, fucking
I
hell. You
spoke to my-
guys, I cannot believe this is happening. If this doesn't tell you, okay, like I keep saying to myself, it's not about Jen McCabe, right? It isn't. It shouldn't be. The fact that they have now, this is the Commonwealth's second witness dedicated to this one issue with Jen McCabe's Google search, which if I was on the jury, I kind of forgot about that in the wake of all the other bullshit that came out after Yuri and Trooper Proctor and everything else. I kind of forgot about that part until it came up when they brought in the lady, right? I was like, oh, wow, there's still, okay. I thought it was weird enough with the first expert, like that this shows you where the Commonwealth's mind is at, right? The fact that they're throwing now the second expert at this issue makes you wonder if there's something to it, right? Because if it was just a defense theory or just a defense poking holes, I mean, not to mention this should all be rebuttal anyway, but we're so far beyond that with this case because all of it should be for rebuttal from what they've presented. This is insane. This is insane that this is what they're doing instead of proving their theory of the case. They're still, and the second witness, just for this one thing, this makes me think that Jen McCabe has more involvement than maybe it kind of was seeming like at certain points. I don't know. What do you guys think? I can't even believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. True. Good point, Fender. Yeah, we initially thought Yuri seemed, I mean, his background, his freaking resume was impressive, you know? But yeah.
My colleague requested if he could contact the investigators and any information that they could share about where this particular timestamp was found so that I could investigate it.
Right.
I was advised at that time that the case had already...
The fact that they're bringing in another witness shows the importance in the Commonwealth's mind of trying to explain this, right? It's a priority thing, right? It shows where their mind is at. It shows shows like their state of mind versus proving their theory.
Uploaded to our own support network. So the full extraction of the device in question was already in Cellbrite possession. And I was able to access it from there and start to examine what the issue was that was causing the confusion.
Now, with reference to this issue, can you describe?
I can't believe they're bringing in another witness for this. This is insane.
Yeah, so the issue, as I was led to believe, is there was...
Guys, finally, we got someone who's an expert at Cellbrite, and this is what they're doing. I cannot wrap my head around this. I can't wait to see what the rest of PlotTube is going to say about this, because this is blowing my mind right now.
For a web history artifact of 2:27 and 40 seconds AM local time, which would be UTC 5. And it didn't make sense to the investigators. And the question was, is there any other interpretation for what this timestamp could mean?
I agree, DSN. I agree.
Explain the timestamp and how it came to be, correct?
I can't believe this is happening right now. I cannot believe this.
Has this arisen in
What?
other instances? Have you been asked the same question or similar
The
question with
fuck?
regard to this type of artifact?
Yeah, several weeks later, so probably around December time last year,
McCabe's
I was
file?
contacted
Should
by
it be
a
Jen
police
McCabe's
investigator
file?
in
Maybe.
Austria with a very similar question, but related to obviously a different internet search. And about a week later, the defense expert in the same case also contacted me asking the same question. The defense expert in that case was able to provide the database, and I was able to provide the answer.
Now, as far as the full extraction, is that the entirety of what you looked at in this instance, or what, if anything else, were you provided with in regard to your review and your analysis in this case?
So I did work with the full extraction, but my interest was focused on just the web history artifacts.
And what, if anything, did you find with regard to the web history artifacts?
So the 2:27:40 timestamp was correct insofar as that is the time that is shown within the database. It was indeed a deleted record, but the interesting thing was why the timestamp said 2:20.
The other thing that this shows is it shows how little the Commonwealth trusted their previous expert who testified about this same issue. It shows how little they trusted her testimony. from the people who brought her in. Like, they hired her. I mean, compared to their law enforcement, I mean, it was way better testimony. It was some of the better testimony we've heard. And yet there were still problems with it. But like, if this is the confidence they placed in her, then what are they thinking about their own law enforcement officers and their lay witnesses? Well, I guess this answers that, right? This, I guess, shows the confidence they have in, first of all, the previous witness who testified about it. And second of all, it shows the confidence or lack thereof they have in Jen McCabe, right? This is insane. It's like cleanup duty. You know what I mean? So yeah, so Patricia, in case you aren't aware, I was not following this case at all until the trial. Like, it was watching opening statements, and that's when I started following it. So I'm coming in with a completely clean slate without knowing anything that happened prior to the trial. And I'm only following what's happening during the trial. I'm not researching stuff. I don't use social media. So I'm going off of just what's presented at trial, which has been great because it's kind of what the jury's witnessing. So I'm not aware of any of that stuff. However, it's possible that after the trial, you know, it might be worth going back and looking at some of the hearings and motions that were filed and things of that nature. I mean, yeah, Lolly doesn't know what's happening. Lolly
740. And I did some testing on this and discovered the reason why 22740 was actually listed in the database, even though that's not the time, in my opinion, that the search was conducted.
And
right, Fender, great point.
what is your
Great
opinion as to
point.
when the search was conducted?
Yeah, the fact
There's plenty of other evidence on that extraction that shows what activity was occurring at 227
Let me give you
and
guys-
40 seconds. And
Let me give you guys an example. Think about other murder trials where you have a defendant, and think about how many experts are brought in for them, for the defendant, for their case in chief. Even somewhere, let's take Alex Murdaugh, okay? Let's take Alex Murdaugh. 1, 2. In Alex Murdaugh's trial, where they had he was on trial for homicide, as you guys well know, they brought in 4 expert witnesses. 4. This is 2 expert witnesses just dedicated. So when you put it into perspective, and 4 was quite a lot. Oftentimes we only see 1 or 2 from a defense's case in chief. This is 2. I cannot believe this is happening. 2 expert witnesses for Jen McCabe, and she's not on trial. I cannot. You guys.
There's plenty of evidence later on in the day that shows that particular search was conducted at 6:23, I believe 51 seconds, and then a similar search at 6:24 and 18 seconds, I believe.
And before we get to that, Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Whiffen, I'm showing you the document. Asking you to take a look at
Thank
that.
you. Yes,
Do you recognize that, sir?
I do, yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
This was the internet history, the history.db database table showing activity from the morning of the 29th of January 2022.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'll seek to introduce and raise the next exhibit.
No objection.
Okay.
It's 14.
Or may I return to the witness?
Yes.
Your Honor, if I may, with court permission to republish it in the record.
Yes.
Or may I approach this to retrieve?
Yes.
No, it's my fault. Mr. Whiffen, do you recognize what's up on the screen now? Is the exhibit you have before you?
I do, yes.
And Ms. Whiffen, there should be a laser pointer on the desk next to you. What I'm going to ask you to do is, if you could, using that laser pointer, explain to the jury what we're looking at in this exhibit and what, if anything, is significant to observe within this exhibit.
Okay, of course. So this was a table I created based on the data from the phone. The first column shows the local time of a record that was written to the history database. This is a database which is tracking all web pages which are loaded as you use them. The second column starts with the URL, so the Uniform Resource Locator, so what you would type in or how the browser knows which website you want to visit. The title is part of the website which is loaded. One of the top attributes of the website will load the title. Visit count relates to an internal counter within Safari, which just tracks how many times a particular website is visited in order to make suggestions to you down the road. And then finally, the last column shows the source of this information. So history.db is the name of the database, history_visits is the name of the table, and then the number is the unique identifier, which is assigned to that particular record in consecutive order. So every time you add a new record, that number will increase by 1.
Mr. Whiffen, probably a couple foundational questions that I should have asked you first, my apologies. With respect to the cell phone extraction that you were provided, that was
Disaster, Lolly.
individual named Jennifer McCabe, is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And fair to say you don't know Jennifer McCabe, never met her, don't know anything about her?
Correct.
And as far as
He's asking that because it's like the first person or one of the first people. I don't know her.
What is an extraction?
An extraction in this case, all of the files and folders had been extracted from the device, saved on a computer in a zip file container. So essentially in a way that is as close to the original from the device as possible.
And again, what is your title specifically with Cellbrite?
It's decoding product manager at the moment.
And so what, if any, relation does what you do have with relation to an extraction and how that's, what's sort of the relationship between what you do and a Cellbrite extraction?
So once the extraction's been extracted and we have the zip file, then Physical Analyzer is the tool that Cellbrite creates to allow examiners to look at that extracted data in a meaningful way. And my role is somewhat shaping how examiners will see that data when they open up Physical Analyzer and look at the extracted data.
And how does your role play into that? What is it that you do that have, what if any relationship does what you do have to do with how examiners will view something from a Cellbrite tool?
Again, so after being an examiner for 10 or 11 years, I've got that kind of understanding of how examiners work. Being someone who also writes my own software and does my own research, then I can kind of cross that void that usually exists between developers and examiners and help both parties try to come to a meaningful conclusion.
He's like a mediator between them.
Ms. Gilman, if you could shrink that just a little. We'll zoom out a little. Now, again, Mr. Whiffen, if you could, using that laser pointer, direct your attention to what, if anything, are significant you observed depicted in this particular case.
Yeah, so the lower two records, which are highlighted in green, are two records which occurred at 2:27 and 42 seconds local time. So 2 seconds after the Google search had allegedly been made. And then the second record is 5 seconds after that at 2:27, 47 seconds. Both those URLs relate to a website of hockamocksports.com.
I know, Fender. Right, not very often. And I love that we're getting to hear this. It's just crazy that it's happening about Jen McCabe.
What is a contiguous identifier?
So again, every SQLite database will assign a unique contiguous identifier number. So again, the very first record created will be given a record ID of 1. The second record will be 2, and so on and so forth. Those numbers are never reused.
I think the
so
compliments
if I was to delete record 3,
he's very
that
polite,
record number will
smart.
never be reused, and I can see that there's
Love
a
the
gap
accent.
and deleted data in that
Knows his
database.
shit.
You used another term in there as far as a SQLite database. If you could
I agree, Fender. I agree. And you know what?
Yeah, a SQLite database.
We know this for a fact when it comes to juries, that even if you bring in experts to try to prove something, let's say you've got a really credible lay witness, right? That really vibes with the jury. And then you bring in an expert and the expert tries to prove through whatever the fuck that it's not accurate, whatever the lay witness, like they're going to go with their gut, and they're told that in their instructions, right? So credibility is completely in the eyes of the jury. And I agree, Fender, if she'd been credible at all, the jury, if that had been the case, they wouldn't have needed experts. But in this case, yes, this would support their thoughts, right, with this expert. So
Essentially, it's a series of tables. It's a way for data to be stored, again, in a meaningful, organized fashion that can be queried, can be examined, can be filtered, searched, etc. It can be useful for anybody who wants to get data from an organized file.
Now, with reference to the searches that you observed within this particular web history, what, if any, relationship did the contiguous identifiers, sort of the range? What, if anything, does that tell you?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that?
What, What, if any, observations did you make as far as those contiguous identifiers in the range they had in relation to the web history that you observed?
Okay, so within the history.db file, there were no missing numbers from the beginning of January, essentially, until early February. That told me as an examiner that no records had been deleted during that time.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
So if I could ask,
That one back.
everyone,
Thank you.
recognize that, sir?
I do, yes.
What do you recognize that to?
This is the browser state record, which identified a search at 2:27:40 a.m.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Almost. We have no objection.
No objection. Oh, hi, Kitsmits. Yeah.
Thank you.
May I return to the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you, Patricia.
Yes.
Awesome. Well done. Yorkshire. I was actually thinking maybe something like Yorkshire, but that makes sense because that is north. I don't know if it's northwest, but
It is, yes.
I don't know how far Yorkshire is from Chester.
Okay, so this is a search
Yeah, that's a
item
good-
exhibit.
That's a good.
It's technically a derivative of a different exhibit that we find on the device. So we found what we consider a web history record. So a web
Also,
history record.
Kitsmits, basically, if you remember from the recap, I know you were there and we were talking about like my some of the biggest problems I had to do with that. The times were based on the odometer. That was the entire basis for his chart. And the odometer was based on making assumptions about what mileage she drove where and when based on Google mapping it. And all that came up in cross. And I think that also my thoughts about how, also Alan Jackson had him clarify the differences between a 3-point turn and a U-turn. Because remember when I was confused, I was like, did he call it a 3-point turn or a U-turn? I don't remember, blah, blah. Well, they came up in cross that the Trooper Paul had called it a U-turn when in fact it's a 3-point turn. And the difference is, of course, in a 3-point turn. Now it makes so much sense, right? In a 3-point turn, you'll be changing gears and braking, driving forward, stopping, reversing, blah, blah. And so basically he got called out on the fact that, yeah, it's actually a 3-point turn, not a U-turn that she's doing. And remember how when we were watching the videos with Yuri about her backing out of John O'Keefe's driveway and bumping into his car, and I was like, wait a second, that's a 3-point turn. What if that's the triggering event? That still seems like that could kind of be where this is going, and that would come out with like a defense expert on the matter. Yeah, and Kitsmits, this is the second. She's gonna fall over. I hope you're sitting down. Kitsmits, this is the second expert witness they've brought in about the Hosslong to die in the snow. Like the guy comes in, he's like, I work for Celebrate, and it's like forensics. And I literally said, I was like, there's no way this is going to possibly be another expert witness for Jen. Like I was pointing out, even in Murdaugh, right? For the defendant, in that case, for the defendant, they had 4 expert witnesses. And that was a lot because oftentimes we see 1 or 2. This is the second expert witness for Jen McCabe. I can't. I know I'm shocking myself again just talking about it. It is. Yes. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts about that. Fucking hell.
But we just mean
It's
we have
the
a
implications
URL
are
that was
huge,
visited
and I
and
think
potentially a timestamp and a title. Searched items looks at all of the web history items that we found and tries to identify were these actually searches that were conducted. So for example, if you were to do a search on Google, you'd see that the website that you're taken to is google.com query, and then it contains the query string that you've typed in. We extract that information, we extract that query and provide it to the user as a searched item. In this case, I can see that it came from the browser state.db WAL file. The search query itself was Hosslong to dying cold, and it shows as a deleted record.
Now, with respect, I think you used a couple of different terms within that as far as a knowledge C database. Can you explain to the jury what that is?
I don't recall saying knowledge C, but I can explain what knowledge C is in this case. Yes, the knowledge C database is at the heart of iOS. It stores lots of information about the activity on the device at any given time. Things like when the backlight's turned on, when the device is unlocked, what application is in focus at the time and how long it's in focus for. And important to this case, which website's on screen at any given time as well.
Now, when you say when a website is in focus, can you expound upon that as far as what exactly do you mean by when you say in focus?
So in terms of iOS itself, when it's in focus, it would be the primary item that's visible on screen. So with iOS, you can have applications in the background that you aren't using, but the one that you are currently using is considered in focus, taking up the entire screen.
I believe you had used the term as far as the browser state DB. Is that correct?
Correct.
And can you explain to the jury what your understanding of that term is and how it relates to it?
Browser state DB is just the name of the database, the name that Apple gave it. It's gone through some changes over the last few years. For example, in iOS 14, it did store the state of the tabs that were open within a browser. In iOS 15, there was a significant change, and the only time that records were written to the database is when the tab was closed. So a significant difference in that it doesn't show you what's currently open, it only shows you what's previously been closed.
Now, this search here, what, if anything, did you observe as far as this record in relation to the history DB related to the search?
This record is not mentioned at all within the history.db database.
And what, if any, missing records from this time frame did you observe either?
There were no missing records in the history.db database. Within this time frame, within the browser state database, there were 3 deleted records.
When you say deleted records as far as your self-rights tool is concerned, what exactly does deleted mean?
These are records that have been deleted, not necessarily by the user, potentially by the system, but they are considered deleted records that we're able to recover.
What are some of the ways that something might be deleted by the system, and which are you talking about the phone, or are you talking about your tool?
The phone. Like our tool is designed as a forensic tool. It's not going to edit, delete, or affect the data in any way, just present what is in the extraction. But there are multiple times on an iOS device or an Android device where cleanup essentially happens, and we start to lose data after a certain amount of time.
Now, with respect, let me just ask this for a moment. With respect to Cellbrite, as far as the tools, have there been a variety of different versions of those tools as far as conducting that forensic extraction?
Yes, so Cellbrite Physical Analyzer has been available for approximately 12, 13 years in various versions.
And what, if any, differences are there between, in general terms, between, say, an old version?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and the jury
obviously-
would have been voir dired as to if they had heard anything before the trial. I'm sure that if anyone that was following quote unquote propaganda from before
In
would
the
not
digital
have been let
forensics
in.
landscape, whenever a provider creates a new feature, we have to change our code to adapt to what they've now introduced. There can be research that's been done, so we
Yeah.
now learn new things.
I guarantee you the jury had never heard of turtle wa. I like that name.
And we add support over time. So something can be supported in this new version of Physical Analyzer that may not have been supported or even existed in a previous version.
Now, with respect to your work in this field, what, if any, tools have you designed or created or something to conduct this type of work?
Aside from Physical Analyzer?
Yes.
Okay, so I have my own tool called Artex, which I've been working on for around 5 years. Since being an examiner myself and struggling to parse any particular application that I needed. So I started to write my own tools, and that's the one that is one that I still maintain on the side in my own time.
Well, that is very
Partly
impressive.
for my own knowledge, but partly because I think it still introduces some fantastic features which aren't available in any other tool for research purposes.
So that's very impressive, but I wonder if it means that the defense expert was able to test that or use it or validate it or anything.
So yeah, I continue to write this tool to this day.
And could you just say the name?
Artex, A-R-T-E-X.
Oh, almost like Artax from Neverending Story.
With regard to the situation depicted in the exhibit up on the screen, what are some of the reasons why this may occur, or why this may read as it does?
Sorry, is it deleted?
Yes.
Oh, the record itself has been deleted. As I said, the reason why it's deleted, through my testing, I've only found 2 ways that that kind of record can be deleted by the user. And I don't believe either of those ways was actually utilized on this device.
And what are those 2 ways?
The user has the option to selectively delete history items. So you can delete either one at a time, or the entire day's content, or the last 2 days' content. Or you can delete all content altogether. If all content had been deleted, we wouldn't have found any information on this phone at all related to web history, so I was able to discount that one quite quickly.
And I guess alluding to what you just said, why is it that you don't believe that either of those 2 methods of user deletion occurred in this context?
Objection, may we approach, please?
I'm sorry?
I said objection, may we approach, please?
Okay.
Okay, let me go forward here.
That highlights both the search.
Okay, That should be about the end. Yeah, I know who Turtle Boy is. You called him Turtle Watt, so I called him Turtle Watt. Or you? Oh, sorry, you said Turtle Twat. I didn't see this, the other T. But I don't think the jury knows who he is, except for Jen McCabe did say that name, but they probably still don't know what she's talking about.
May I have one moment, John?
Sure.
Mr. Whiffen, moving on from that for a moment. May I approach the witness, John?
Yes.
Thank you.
That document I've just handed you, Mr. Whiffen, you recognize that?
I do, yes.
So what do you recognize that to?
It's a document that highlights both the search terms that were found in mobile safari.plist and the method of searching.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Commonwealth seeks to introduce the witness and exhibit. No objection.
Okay. Thank you.
May I return to the witness? The course mission may be published for the jury.
Okay.
Mr. Whiffen, do you recognize what's up on the screen as the next exhibit?
I do, yes.
You did use a term in there, I believe, called a P list. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you explain to the jury what you understand that term to mean and how it relates to what you're about to talk about up on the screen?
Yeah, so a P list or a property list is Apple's way of storing serialized data. That essentially means a list of data with names and values.
And sir, if you could, again, using that way to point and direct the jury's attention to explain sort of what you're looking at and what, if anything, is significant to observe in this particular slide I take.
Yeah, so again, this is a table I created from the data within the mobile safari.plist. The term shown down the left is what the user would have typed in to the search bar. Sorry, I keep blinding somebody. The search bar in the bottom of the Safari browser window. The UTC time is the time which is actually recorded within the plist. It's recorded as a string, so just text as it's presented on the screen there. And then I converted that and subtracted 5 hours to bring it into local time around Canton.
Now, aside from this just for a moment, with regard to, you're familiar with what's termed as a private browsing mode?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what that is and how it relates to this?
Yeah, so private browsing mode is a setting you can set on iOS devices or primarily most devices that prevents any of your browsing activity being recorded. So that it won't save the searches, it won't save the navigations, it protects everything so that it can't be found later on.
And what, if any, relation did that have to what your analysis of the extraction of this?
If these searches had been conducted while in private browsing mode, these searches would not exist within this file.
So is it your opinion that they were not conducted in any kind of private browsing mode?
Correct.
Now, are you also familiar with the term as far as failure to load?
Yes.
Can you explain that to the jury and how that applies to this?
Yeah, so obviously whenever you try to visit a web page, there's a stream of information coming from the web to the device, which then renders onto the screen. At the completion of the load event, there's a function effectively which runs, and that records the visit to the history database. If for some reason the page doesn't load and it shows up with an unable to load message, so for example, you don't have an internet connection at all, that unable to load will be recorded. If, however, the device stalls and it just sits kind of waiting to load, nothing gets written to the history database. And if you were to close the browsing window prior to the page completing its load event, nothing will be written to history.
Would that be written to somewhere else within the phone as far as any other storage areas?
Technically, the only place I found would be the browser state.
Now, with regard to the plist files, does the plist file save all sort of history items or no?
Primarily, it's used to save preferences. So you'd have a lot of information in there if it's using light mode or dark mode or when you want tabs to auto clear, that kind of information. But it also records several days history of searches. The actual number of days searches, I actually don't know.
And what, if any, relationship does that have with regard to the search bar that's located on the bottom of this table?
in order for the search item to be saved to the mobile Safari plist, you need to actually type into this particular search bar. If you were to just visit google.com and start typing into the Google search bar, it will not be recorded within the mobile Safari.plist.
And so what, if anything, were you able to determine about those two searches with regards to what you observed?
So these particular two searches were conducted at 623.51 and 624.18 respectively. They were searched using the search bar that's built into Safari. The fact that they didn't exist within HistoryDB and that there were no deleted records from history.db leads me to believe that they never successfully loaded.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
That new document that I just handed you, do you recognize that?
I do, yes.
What do you recognize that?
This was the additional, the items from the history.db, I believe.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm about to seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibit. Okay.
Okay. Could you bring it?
Oh, what's happening? Another. So I wonder if it's possible to test it out with like the tab thing, right? Like if you, okay, let me go forward.
This was searches I actually don't know.
And what, if any, relationship does that have with regard to the search bar that's located on the bottom of this table?
Coded. Coming from the web string, so just text as it's presented on the screen there.
I think I went
And then I
back
converted.
far. Hold on.
Seek to introduce and admit.
Okay, here we go. This is it because they had to introduce this. It's okay.
Okay. Could you bring it?
Oh, yeah, this is where we were. All right, let me go forward more. All right.
You are unmuted.
May I return to the witness?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Whiffen, if you could just repeat exactly what that is in the next exhibit.
Yeah, sorry, it's a comparison between the search terms found in the plist, so the mobile Safari plist, and the search terms found within the history.db database.
So the items contained within this table are items that were contained within the extraction that you examined, correct?
Correct.
And Your Honor, with court's permission, if I could display that to the jury.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Whiffen, if you could, again, using the laser pointer just to track.
So, okay, so I just did this just as a test. So I have a ton of Safari tabs open up on my phone. Like, I don't even want to tell you how many, it's embarrassing. But some of them are things that I searched for, I don't know, a long time ago. So I pulled open a tab when I was looking up the lyrics for all the small things from when I was trying to sing that during a live stream from like, I don't know, a couple weeks ago probably. And I opened that tab and I watched it actually reload the search. I watched it because I hadn't opened it, right? So I watched it actually reload. Like it looks like it's actually loading it brand new, right? And then I went to my history, and I know this is different, but this is the best we can, just for testing it out in terms of just what you can see with using common sense, right? And then I went to my history, and it's not for my history for today, even though I watched it reload that tab. So
The jury, what we're looking at in this table, and what, if anything, is significant between sort of the two sources of information.
Okay, so the first list, the plist term, shows the term within the mobile Safari.plist, excluding
try it again with
the
another
two
tab.
that we've already mentioned, which are of note. And the first timestamp column shows the timestamp according to that plist. The history item shows the search term as recorded.
I just tried it again with another tab. This is from when we were doing Murdaugh deep dive. I had a tab open with a Google search for Camp Branch Crossing, South Carolina, and I had never actually finished doing that search on that tab on the phone. So I opened the tab up and it did the Google search again, or it looks like it, right? It's loading the Google search, and I went to my history, and it's not in my history.
In the history database.
I can test it
And
out
then
too
we
if
have
you
the
want,
timestamp
if you
as
get
per
something
the history database. So the purpose of this document was to show that we have a search
I
for
know.
raining men
Insane.
and a
It's
history item related
insane.
to the Google search for raining men, and they show within a second of each other. Again, the next one down, Antoinette, Ock, and basketball, and the associated Google search. And again, the timestamps are within a second. This list was non-exhaustive. There was hundreds of examples within the history.db, but limited examples within the mobile Safari plist. And as I mentioned, the two searches of interest, the how long to die in the kickd and how long to die in the cold, didn't exist within the history.db at all.
Ms. Gilman, you can take that down. Now, sir, if I could ask you just a little bit now about the browser state DB. Again, can you explain to the jury sort of what that is and how it, if at all, it plays a role in your analysis?
Yep. So initially, pre and including iOS 14, the browser state database would show all tabs that you currently had opened. So as soon as I go into my browser and open a new tab, a record is created. It includes information such as the time that I opened the tab or the time I last viewed the tab, the current URL, which is being displayed within that tab. It shows information whether it's in private browsing mode or not. So in that kind of case, in iOS 14 and below, we're able to see current private browsing records and subsequently recover deleted ones. But in iOS 15, things changed. The record was no longer written as soon as the tab was opened. It was only opened when the tab was closed. Sorry, the record was only created when the tab was closed. That meant that our ability to recover that kind of history was significantly lower. It means that it no longer makes use of the private browsing field because now private browsing records simply are never written to that database. So now we can only really see a list of all of the tabs that have been closed, not which are currently open.
Now, with regard to the browser state DB, is there something referred to as a last view timestamp?
There is, yes. That's one of the fields within the database.
Same.
And can you explain?
Well, technically, as we've said, they've not tendered anybody as a witness.
What kind of information is kept there and what it means?
Yeah, so from my research based on this, that timestamp relates to the time that the tab took focus. So that's either when the user creates the brand new tab, when they switch between tabs and bring a tab back into focus, when they close a tab, which automatically brings one of the background tabs into focus, or if Safari has been completely closed and reopened, that essentially acts like almost a new tab, and the timestamp gets updated at that point.
Can you explain how an earlier timestamp could be associated from, say, tab is open, something is done, tab is closed, tab is reopened, something else is done? How that earlier timestamp could then be associated data-wise?
I think I followed that. Okay, so if, for example,
Not your fault.
12 p.m., I create a new tab. I can do a search for whatever I want. And at that point, if I close the tab, then the record that gets created will show that I opened a tab at 12 p.m. and I did a search. Excuse me. However, if I open the same tab at 12 p.m., do a search, close it, like completely close down Safari and reopen Safari, that would also update the same timestamp to show that I'd opened it up again. What I meant to say at that point is that if I create a 12 o'clock tab, minimize Safari. I can leave it for several hours, for several days, for several weeks. The time difference is not really important. When I come back to it and open up Safari again from a background state, the timestamp is not updated. So it will still show 12 p.m. today, and it will show whatever my most recent navigational event is. So I can search for something in 3 weeks' time using the same tab I opened today, and the timestamp will show today's time.
He's saying it's different if you close out of it.
This is a good place to take our break.
Okay, I'm going to test it. Closing out of Safari. Now I'm opening Safari.
Thank you.
All rise to the jury.
Now I'm going to click on one of those old tabs.
Could I see counsel regarding timing, please?
Yes.
Well, that didn't change a damn thing on my phone. I did it like he said. I closed out of Safari so it's not running in the background, and then reopened it and opened that one of those old tabs, the Camp Branch, South Carolina tab, which is a Google search. I asked to search it, and it's still not changed. It's still not on my history. I'm gonna do another tab just to be sure. Here's another one that was a Google search. Go to my history, and it's not there. So I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, I know, I guess, I mean, of course it could be different, right? Like in terms of what the Celebrate report says, but at the end of the day, we know jurors are going to rely on their practical daily life experience and stuff, right? Especially if they don't trust Jen McCabe, then, you know, so they're at lunch, guys. So when did she say, hold on, let me see what she said, what time they're going to come back. I always miss that when it happens.
For something in 3 weeks' time using the same tab I opened today, and the timestamp will show today's time.
All right. I think this is a good place to take our break.
Mr. Whiffen, I know we, of course, ask you to stay with us, okay? As the jurors file up, you can file up behind us.
Thank you.
Court, all rise to the jury.
So I wonder if she puts anything on the record. And then at that point, talks about what time.
Could I see counsel regarding timing, please?
Okay, let's see what happens, or if they just cut the feed. I just have it on 2x speed to see if we get to a thing about the lunch. Good night, Fender. We love you. I'll be covering tomorrow some of the voir dires too. So make sure you check that out. And then the next recap, I believe, will be Wednesday night, because Wednesday's a day off of work. So let's see if we end up hearing anything. I'm just curious if she'll even just say like what time they're coming back from lunch. Karen's hair looks nice today. I know, right, Patricia? So you see how they have like highlighters on the table, or like the regular kind? If y'all have never tried gel highlighters, I highly recommend them. I find them very superior, vastly superior to the standard highlighters. Like those are the standard ones on the table. Gel ones are awesome. They're like almost like a combination crayon. Okay.
You are unmuted.
What's she said, 140? I think, hold on. I think she said until 140, but let me just go back a second. So here's where I was commenting on the highlighters, and then she spoke up. They're going to still be on direct, though, I think, anyway.
All right, so recess until 1:40.
You are unmuted.
Yeah, it sounds like she said 140.
All right. Recess. Lunch and recess. 1:40.
Oh, fuck, you just said it. God damn it. Hold on. Fucking hell, man. I think it's 140, but maybe it's 145. Oh, my God. I missed it again. Sorry, guys. I'm the worst. I'm just trying to be efficient with the time. They take short lunches. Yeah, Patricia, I'm glad you've used them. They are awesome. They do, and they don't smear and smudge like the others do. They don't smear the ink. They're fucking great. I mean, it's, you know what? If she lied about seeing, maybe she, you know, if he was in the yard, I still think somebody would have seen him. Maybe she did see him. So maybe it was like she saw him there. And in that case, it doesn't even necessarily mean that Karen's not involved. In other words, it's possible, like, it doesn't necessarily.
You are unmuted.
All right. Supposed to recess. Lunch and recess. 1:40.
140 sounds like. Okay. Anyway, so what I was going to say is this, though, is that even if Jen did make that search at that time, it doesn't necessarily rule out who was involved and who wasn't involved or whatever. It could just mean that Jen saw the body and lied about seeing the body, right? And then did that search, potentially. But then it's like, well, why wouldn't she have helped him? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I will say that she seemed callous to me, so I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, or it could have been a random coincidence, right? Maybe it's like she was, I mean, like, this didn't happen, but like hypothetically in another universe, like what if somebody was watching a show like that show called like I'm Alive, where people have like near-death experiences and like they're in an avalanche and you don't know yet what the outcome's going to be. Like there's absolutely circumstances where you could Google that and it would be completely, and there wouldn't be anything nefarious at all. And then it could be a coincidence that somebody ended up dying. You know what I mean? But like, that's not at all, but like, I don't know, man. Is that what you think, Patricia? I don't think the Commonwealth has come anywhere close. That's such an understatement. They haven't even offered a theory of what happened to John O'Keefe at all. And so, right. That's true. Remember, the Commonwealth has to prove it. And the jurors are only going off of what they're hearing in the trial, right? So for me, I've said it a million times. I'll say it one last time on the record. For me, it was over at the Solo Cups. If I were a juror, I don't care if I thought the person sitting there was the most evil monster of all time who murdered 1 billion people. By the time it got to the Solo Cup, there was already a lot of questionable stuff before it got to the Solo Cups. But for me, the Solo Cups is done. Why are we here? This is embarrassing. This is a miscarriage of justice. Let's all go home. Like, that's it for me if I'm a juror. Even if I think the person did it. Even if I think whatever, you know? Because that you can't get, how do you get past that? I just don't know how you get past that. And it's just gotten worse from there. Amazingly, it's gotten worse from there. It's like, wow, they just keep outdoing themselves, right? Like, my God. So y'all, I guess they're going to be coming back soon. They're going to be on direct still. I might pop back for cross. I might pop back in for more. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens because who knows how much longer he'll be on direct, right? See when he gets to cross, or maybe it'll be brief. Maybe they'll bring in another witness. So I might pop back on. If for anyone who's not joined the Discord will give you notifications too for, like, I have an upcoming videos tab there, because people always report that sometimes YouTube notifications don't go through. I know that's happened to me as well. So, but it will notify you, should notify you on YouTube, but it will definitely notify you on Discord if I do go live again. And I try to keep y'all updated as well there too. So here's the thing. That trial has not been made public, only parts of it. So I cannot speak to anything about that because I have not been able to watch the trial. I think there's only snippets of closing arguments or opening statements. It's nothing in full. I would need to watch. I'm a gavel to gavel kind of gal, right? So I would need to watch the entire trial, gavel to gavel, in order to really weigh in on how I would have voted as a jury, as a member of the jury. Now, the way you ask that question is if I were on the jury, right? In terms of me now today, of course I think she did it, right? But in terms of answering that question as in someone who's on the jury, who has not been exposed to it, who has to go off of what's presented in trial, I don't know what was presented in trial because I wasn't able to watch it, and it's not on YouTube. So, and I don't know what the deal is with that. It looks like it was, I know that it was live at the time, so I know it was filmed. I know there were cameras, but what's on YouTube is only just snippets, and I feel like they've kind of come and gone. So I don't know. If ever there's an opportunity to watch that whole trial, gavel to gavel, you better believe we will do that. We will cover the whole thing, and we will go into it as if we know nothing, or try to best we can. Because it is important. Like, I feel like it's possible to in your mind, like in your personal, like, mind's eye, I feel like it's possible to still have a feeling about somebody, but also to set that aside for the exercise of trying to view it the way a juror would watching a trial and go off of what was presented. I think it's possible. Attorneys have to do that shit all the time. But the little evidence I know about, again, I would like to watch the whole trial gavel to gavel, but there was a lot more evidence against her, it seems like, than what's in this case. And there also weren't red solo. Like, there's actually really no way to compare it, even if I just think about it, because, I could be wrong. Maybe there were gross miscarriages of justice in that trial in terms of the way the investigation was conducted. Maybe there was a lot of, conflicts of interest. Maybe they didn't bring in a medical examiner, but I don't think any of that is the case, because this is bizarre that any of this is happening in this trial. Like, this is incredibly bizarre. Everything about this is bizarre. So I can't imagine any of that would have been the case for Casey Anthony. Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Kit Smits. So again, I can go off of my impressions from her, like, yeah, but again, if I'm trying to bring an objective approach to it, the way I try to cover these trials, right? If I were to try to take that, I could totally do that. I could totally go in with an open mind and go in fresh start, again, because just like what Kitsman said, very little. I've only seen few snippets from like closing arguments or opening statements. But that's not, I could go in with a completely fresh start to watch that trial, gavel to gavel, and go off of what's presented for sure. So you're saying that's the defense strategy. I do know that to be the case. That's not really helpful though, in terms of like, I'm speaking about in this, what I was referring to was in this investigation, like I'm saying, was there anything messed up about the way that the Florida, the state, investigated her case or prosecuted? But what you're referring to is a defense theory of the case. Yeah, absolutely, Kitsmits. And that's what I'm saying. And that's why I think it's a good exercise to be able to set that aside and watch a trial the way we've been trying to do with this one, based on just what we're seeing. I had no opinion going into it. So that's why, like, literally, I didn't know the first thing about this trial. So had I come in and the Commonwealth proved had they proved how John O'Keefe died, we'd still be a lot further along than we are. Had they done anything, this is just not normal. This is just not normal. It's not normal. None of this is normal. But I had no opinion going into it. And I know I'm not alone in that. Like every single person on LawTube who I admire and look up to came in knowing nothing about it with a completely open mind, as they always do, unbiased. And they're all saying the same. Like, I think it's clear, right? I would have a hard time. I'm just going to be honest here. If anyone were to say to me, yeah, the Commonwealth has proved their case based off of only what's happened in this trial, I would have a hard time not either laughing or being like, what's going on here? Because I don't see how anyone could actually say that with a straight face and mean it. It's impossible. Like literally, it's just not possible. And I've actually seen a lot of people change their opinions on it. People who had an opinion going into it, right? I've seen a lot of them change their minds over the course of this trial that she didn't do it. But so if you had an opinion, in my mind, it's like if you had an opinion that she did it, or if you had no opinion because you didn't know anything. If you're watching this trial, I find it really hard to see how you can think the Commonwealth has proved their case. And that's what it comes down to. I mean, yes, this is actually important in the sense that given the charges that they brought forth against her, motive actually is a big part of it. That's part of that second-degree murder charge. There does have to be some sort of precipitating event. But it's like that seems like such a far cry considering we've not heard from the medical examiner. I'm sorry. We've not heard about Karen's cell phone. We've not heard from anyone who actually can talk intelligently about her vehicle. And there's so much missing. There's just so much missing. There's so much missing. And then on this, the list is so long, I'm not even going to start the list of why there's so many problems. There's just too many to even go through. Kitsmits, yeah, coming in on this case, I was entirely open to Karen Read being guilty. Me too. Absolutely. Me too. I tend to, yes, I'm with you. And we've talked a lot about this, how there's supposed to be a presumption of innocence, but because we trust in our government system and our justice system, it's really kind of the opposite, where we tend to believe they have the right person. I'm with you 100%, Kitsmits. Same here. I was open to her being guilty, and usually I do assume that if they got to this point, they must have the right person in custody, right? For a good reason. I'm with you 100%. Can't see how they got it this far. Me neither. I mean, I don't see the point of, I don't know. I don't agree. I disagree politely and respectfully, Patricia. I don't know. I don't know how. Have you met Karen Read personally? I don't really know how name calling is helpful. I mean, I don't know what to say. Here's what I can say respectfully. I think that everybody can only benefit from putting bias aside, putting speculation or propaganda or whatever the fuck aside, and going off of the facts as they are presented in trial. That's the whole point of the trial. That's why they bring in a jury who doesn't have these strong opinions. If someone had come in for the jury, voir dire, and called her a despicable bitch, guess where they wouldn't be sitting? On the jury, right? So there's a reason for that. Because bias doesn't serve anybody, honestly, guys. Name calling doesn't serve anybody. Bias doesn't serve anybody. Stereotyping people doesn't serve anybody. And being closed-minded doesn't serve anybody. it is important to remain open-minded and listen to the facts, listen to the evidence as it's presented. And again, the problem here being, for anyone who forgot, the problem here being,
There's no evidence of anything in this case.
leave me take it from Lolly himself. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at the facts as they are presented in the trial, as y'all know, and I'm just I'm seeing it as it comes in, and I'm not. I don't. It's so far-fetched to think that the Commonwealth, like I said, has come anywhere close to proving anything. They're not even using the word murder, right? They're calling it the incident. So, I don't know. I don't know. Does anyone else have anything else to say about? I will say I'm very happy that there's so far covering this in recaps and in the live trial. We've not had really any name calling from anybody, which I appreciate, guys. And I appreciate that everybody's remained very objective and tried to view everything, bringing in their own life experiences, but staying open-minded and approaching it from like an objective and intelligent point of view. I think that that's productive. I think that that's why that's why I'm covering it, right? I don't see the benefit in other things. So. But I saw the camera move. I wonder if they're coming back. They were supposed to be back already. Imagine what the world would be like, our country or any country, any country that does have a jury system, if they didn't do their best to voir dire jurors and bring in people who have an open mind and who can be objective and stick to the facts of the case. Imagine what any of us could be found guilty of things at any point in time. It would be a disaster. I mean, it wouldn't be a safe place to live, Kid Smith says, I could still be convinced that Karen Reed did it with intent. I can see a path to, right. Great way of saying it, but the prosecution hasn't actually shown that path to me. Yep. I agree. And that's the point, right? The Commonwealth has to prove it. They have the burden. And to think that, and to say mean things about someone or call them names doesn't mean that person did or didn't do anything. It doesn't mean they're guilty. It doesn't mean they're not guilty. It's irrelevant, actually. It's completely irrelevant. Well, Patricia, that's still making a lot of assumptions, though, right? And everything that we know in terms of her relationship with the kids was a good one, and she cared for them, right? I mean, I know that we saw some other things in the text messages with Brian Higgins, but that's not how she behaved around them. So unless she takes a stand, we may never know why she said those things to Brian Higgins, but I could see other reasons for it. If you're trying to act like you don't like kids because the other person doesn't like kids, for example, right? If you're trying to come across as like fun and single, I don't know. There could be other reasons why, there's dynamics, interpersonal dynamics that you can only understand it if you hear it from the people, right? Yeah. There's more what to come. More bias and ineptitude, probably. That would track with what we've seen, for sure. I guess they're coming back. Let's see. If they go to cross, I might stay on for a bit. But if it's more lolly, I might jump. I'll probably just call it and then come back on cross, maybe.
Thank you. Maybe see the quote back in a second.
Okay, whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Oh, there it is.
You are, may I approach?
Yes.
All right, he's approaching. Yeah, I'm not going to try to speculate as to the inner workings of people's complicated and complex relationships. You guys, we all know no one can know except for the people who are in it. Yeah, Kit Switz, I agree. Well said.
Another document, do you
Thank
recognize
you.
that?
I agree.
I do, yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
This is the
Yeah,
entire
I agree. Kit Switz.
Google
Yeah,
URL that was found on the browser state record.
yeah,
So
it was
broken
complicated.
down into
I mean,
each of its.
like I was saying, just the interpersonal relationships between her and John were complicated, just like with her and the kids. And she even said as much, that it was complicated. Yeah, I mean, she even did say to Higgins, for example, that she had bonded with them. So, and to others as well.
Important sections.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to introduce and admit as the next exhibit.
Same objection as before, is that, Your Honor.
Okay, there are a couple of different objections. I need to see it. I don't know what you're talking about.
We're going to sidebar. All right, guys. So what I'm going to do. Okay, what I'm going to do is, unfortunately, because I need to use my computer to work on like things like the recap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and end it like I said here. And then I might pop back in once they get into cross. So just be on the lookout for that, and I'll just separate out, like I'll label this one. If I come back in, I'll label like AM and PM streams like I've done before when I've split it up. But that's really what I'm interested in, because you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens, right? Like if there is any problems with what this dude's methodology, I mean, he seems great, right? But if there's any problems, we will learn when it comes out in cross. Patricia, no, I haven't, because again, I'm trying, once I started watching this trial, because I had nothing coming into it, I wanted to keep it that way so that I can be informed and base any thoughts that I have on only what the jury is seeing.
You are unmuted.
That will be the next exhibit.
I will watch it after the trial.
Thank you.
Yeah. Same Kit Smiths.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Whiffen, what's up on the screen now, is that what you have before you as exhibit 618?
It is, yes.
And if you could, again, using a laser pointer.
Okay.
direct
All right.
attention
All right.
to, what
Fucking
we're
hell.
looking at in exhibit 618.
So yeah. All right.
Okay, so the right.
So I'm gonna, who knows how much longer we'll be on direct, right? So I'll keep an eye out, and if they start cross, I'll try to pop back on here with another stream. But I at least we got to go through a lot of that stuff with Trooper Paul. We got to catch some of that cross, and we got to meet this nice fellow, Mr. Whiffen, I think it was. What was it? Yes, Mr. Whiffen. But also I'll be covering some of the voir dire tomorrow live, and then the next recap should be on Wednesday. So oh, okay, so you've actually seen some of that. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen any of that. So but that's interesting. And y'all, of course, y'all are welcome to look at whatever you want. Sometimes it's actually helpful when I'm like, there's some sort of important piece of information. DSN's been great because I know he's actually all up on all of that. But yeah. You're welcome, Patricia. It's Chelsea, but yes, you're welcome. Yes, great. And it is important. It is it's always nice at least having people that are polite and respectful too. If it's important, right? So we can talk about these things, and please join us again as well, either later today or tomorrow or on the recaps. But yeah, y'all are great. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being a squirrel. Thanks for being awesome, my friends. Yes, it's CH, and I know phones also could have done autocorrect too, so it's totally cool. Yeah, good debate. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate being able to have like the respectful and intelligent debates. So, all right, see you guys hopefully soon, and I will roll the outro.